Chapter 482. Honorable swordsman Guan Chong had experienced the calamity of the cloudy forest realm, and had yet to recover, so he could only stand by the side to guard the other three sword masters. But no matter how low-key he was still a sword cultivator who had refined his spirit to the void. As long as he stood there, he would be a deterrent, making others not dare to act rashly. Although the Great Qin dynasty did not make it clear that the gathering was organized this time, it was actually targeted at Shushan. They wanted to cause some trouble for Shushan within the Nine Heavens Sword Union. The Shushan sword sect naturally would not sit idly by when they heard the news. In the end, 4 Void Reversion Realm sword masters attacked together. Apart from them, there were also Honorable Swordsman Ning Lang, and a group of first-tier Primordial Spirit Realm sword cultivators. Shushan was deliberately establishing their might this time. The number of experts present was impressively more than all the sword cultivators attending the gathering combined. And they were even stronger. Honorable Swordsman Tong Tian, Honorable Swordsman Thunderbolt, Honorable Swordsman Vastzi, and some second-tier Primordial Spirit Realm experts of the Great Qin dynasty did not come, causing an awkward scene at the gathering. Shushan, with the power of one sect, completely crushed the alliance of the other factions. Even if Honorable Swordsman Streamlight successfully broke through on the front lines, they only had 3 second-tier Primordial Spirit Realm experts on their side. Coincidentally, Shushan Sword Sect's strong attack this time was also very targeted, specifically targeting the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Great Qin dynasty, and the Celeritas Sword Sect. As the second strongest sword sect in the Nine Heavens Sword League, the Heavenly Sword Sect was naturally the focus of Shushan Sword Sect's suppression. They wanted to teach them who was the absolute boss of the Nine Heavens Sword League, and who was the #1 sword holy land in the world. The Great Qin dynasty was the instigator of this gathering targeting Shushan. The main culprit would definitely not let him off. Sword Honorable Li Xiong was really determined to kill this time. He wanted to kill Sword Honorable Flying Snow here, and teach the Great Qin dynasty a lesson. Celerita's sword sect appeared as traitors, and would not be let off either. As for the Sun Moon Sword Sect, which was a vassal of Great Qin, and the Thunderclap Sword Sect, which was a vassal of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Constellation Sword Sect, which had always been neutral, and the Songhai Sword Sect, which was connected to the Great Zhou dynasty, mainly acted as a deterrent. In the endless void, the concept of distance seemed to have been lost. Countless sword lights flashed in the space, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. Old Immortal Sword, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and Sword Venerable Streamlight were experts that had attained the second tier of the Essence Soul realm. Old Immortal Sword in particular had already attained the Tao 10,000 years ago. His great Tao leads to the Heavenly Sword had been cultivated to the point of perfection. But at this moment, the 3 of them were facing the 3 great sword masters of the Mount Shu Sword Sect, and they were all at a disadvantage. Sword Venerable Solar Luminary, and the others frowned as they watched. Ben Lazy's expression was gloomy as he stared at Old Sword Immortal and Junior Sword Venerable. In the Mount Shu Sword Sect's camp, a man in brocade clothes with a hooked nose looked at Ben Lazy calmly. "Why? Do you also want to come down and exchange swordsmanship? If you have this intention, I Ning will accept it." The Thunderbolt Sword Sect's Sword Dao has always been regarded as the most ferocious Sword Dao mystique apart from Mount Shu's Xiaoshang Sword. You seem to have recently attained the primordial spirit. I can help you test its quality. The person who spoke was Sword Venerable of Broken Mountain Ning Lang. The way of the sword that he practiced was the Xiaoshang sword. Although his tone was calm, it caused Ben Lazy's expression to change slightly. Ning Lang glanced at Ben Lazy and said silently, "Do you have any objections? All the swords in the world come from Mount Shu. In the past, the founding ancestor of your Thunderbolt Sword Sect personally came to Mount Shu's Xiaoshang Peak to seek guidance. Why? Don't the people of the Thunderbolt Sword Sect know about it?" As though it was a footnote to Ning Lang's words, an extremely resplendent and vigorous sword light pierced through the heavens and earth in the void, erupting with a powerful energy that made everyone's heart tremble. Accompanying this sharp and ruthless sword light with spiritual energy, snowflakes suddenly fell from the endless void. Upon closer inspection, those snowflakes were actually condensed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow's sword will. But at this moment, the sword will was gradually dissipating. As the snowflakes fell, they constantly disintegrated and eventually disappeared without a trace. In the beginning, there were only a few snowflakes, but as time went on, they seemed to be endless. But no matter how many snowflakes there were, they could only end up with dust on the ground. This was the sword will condensed by sword venerable flying snow, but it was actually destroyed by someone at its core. It lost its original strength and concept, and eventually became rotten. In the void, a large amount of snowflakes gathered to form a white-robed middle-aged man. He was sword venerable flying snow. Even though his appearance did not change much, everyone present was an expert who had cultivated the sword Tao for thousands of years. They could tell that sword venerable flying snow had lost. At this moment, even though sword venerable flying snow's appearance did not change, his temperament seemed to have changed from a peerless divine sword that radiated with cold light to a rusty, empty shell of a piece of scrap metal. Sword venerable flying snow looked at sword venerable Li Meng, who was slowly walking out of the dark space, and muttered to himself, 2,000 years of bitter cultivation is still not enough? Sword venerable sunlight and the others fell silent. Looking at sword venerable Li Meng, who seemed to have turned back into an ordinary person, they all felt their hearts sink. Most sword cultivators did not practice spiritual techniques or refine immortal treasures. They only used their longswords to battle the world. Even primordial spirit experts only used their swords and did not rely on external objects. This was because their attacks were sharp, and they were especially ferocious in fights. Their actual combat ability was usually outstanding among cultivators of the same realm. And Shushan sword sect was even more so a model. Their name was praised throughout the ages. There had always been a private saying in the heaven primordial world that Shushan cultivators are one level higher. This meant that in actual combat, any Shushan sword cultivator could fight against other cultivators that were at least one small realm higher. The three tiers of the primordial spirit stage were primordial spirit incarnation, refined spirit to void, and void fusion. They were different from the early, middle, and late stages of the Yuanying stage, or the early, middle, and late stages of the golden elixir period and foundation establishment stage. The difference between each tier was much greater. The difference in strength might not be an insurmountable chasm, but in terms of cultivation difficulty, the three primordial spirit stage were basically equivalent to the difference between three major realms. And among the Shushan cultivators, there had once been someone who proudly claimed that Shushan first-tier primordial spirit stage sword cultivators could fight against second-tier primordial spirit stage cultivators from other sections. Shushan refined spirit to void cultivators could fight against void fusion cultivators from other sections. This saying had never been publicly acknowledged by the Shushan sword sect, nor had it been verified. However, there would be no smoke without fire. The existence of such a rumor proved the strength of the Shushan sword Tao. The scene before them seemed to prove this point. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, was defeated by venerable swordsman Li Meng without a chance to retaliate. This scene seemed to serve as a warning to venerable solar luminary and the others. What kind of colossus were they trying to fight against? Looking at the other two battles, it was even more chilling. Venerable swordsman Little Shang's incarnation spanned tens of thousands of feet, like a celestial river. His cold and domineering sword light forced venerable swordsman Streamlight, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, to the point that he could only use the speed advantage of the instant sword escape to dodge. He did not dare to face it head-on. And old sword immortal, who had tempered his dermic powers and sword Tao for 10,000 years, could not gain any advantage against venerable swordsman Little Shang, who was not even half his age. He was even forced into a disadvantageous position. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow's sword intent spread across the sky. It was ever-changing and had shocking destructive power. It could instantly shatter the entire void. Old Sword Immortal's Great Tao Heavenly Sword had brilliant sword light that shot up into the 9 heavens. It was a power that pierced through the heavens and earth, completely ignoring the barriers of time and space. Celestial Light Sword Sect's instant sword escape comprehended the mysteries of time and grasped the true meaning of instant, one of the two extremes of time. It grasped the profound meaning of instant, which was 1/60th of a flick of a finger. The Thunderbolt Swordsek's Sword Dao was extremely violent and unyielding. The constellation Swordsek's Sword Dao used the Sword Dao to manifest the changes of thousands of stars. Every Sword Dao contained great power, and each contained boundless profundities. However, in front of the Shushan Sword Dao, all of them paled in comparison. Shushan's 6 meridian swords were all different, but all of them had reached the pinnacle within their own domain, becoming the pinnacle of similar sword daos. And their source, the heavenly immortal sword Qi, was even stronger. It was so extensive that it contained all of the sword daos of the divine land. All the swords in the world came from Shushan. It was an incomparably harsh sentence, but Old Sword Immortal, Ben Lazy, Venerable Sun Luminary, and the others could not refute it. Duanyu, don't waste your breath. Venerable Guanchong said indifferently. We previously received news that the Mystic Gates sect master, Lin Feng, is also here. Other than the sky-piercing, Great Qin, and Liuguang families, this person is also the main person. Ning Lang nodded. With the 6 meridian swords gathered, this person can no longer be arrogant. Venerable Guanchong said. Although that Lin Feng's sword Dao is sharp, he did not dare to face Sect Master head-on in the cloudy forest world. It can be seen that the heavenly immortal sword Qi can restrain this person's sword Dao. Sect Master said that his sword Dao is of great use to our Shushan, and this is our chance. That's right. If we can capture this person, it's naturally for the best. Ninglang answered. Even if we can't capture him, we have to get the foundations of his sword Dao out of him. Oh, so Shushan cares so much about me? The two of them conversed, and before their voices finished, a crack suddenly tore open in the void. Surging purple qi gushed out from within. Following that, a figure dressed in purple robes slowly walked out from the spatial crack. It was Lin Feng. Seeing Lin Feng, Ninglang's heart suddenly turned cold. Lin Feng's shocking sword that day surfaced in his mind again, making his heart palpitate. As a sword cultivator, his will was firm. Towards something that threatened him, his first reaction was not to fear and submit, but to kill the other party by all means possible. At this moment, facing Lin Feng again, thinking of how his side had sent out all the experts this time around, Ninglang's heart instantly calmed down. Looking at Lin Feng, he said, "You are also here to participate in this gathering to have an exchange of sword Dao? That couldn't be better. After our last meeting, I have always wanted to experience your sword Dao again." Lin Feng swept a glance over him, and then looked at the other Shushan sword cultivators. His gaze lingered on Honorable Swordsman Guanchong, Honorable Swordsman Li, and the other 2 sword masters for a moment, a playful smile on his lips. What? Only when you have enough people standing behind you will you have the courage to draw your sword. Ninglang did not answer but growled, "Draw your sword." He directly shed his human form, transforming into a huge bronze sword that was 10 meters long and as wide as a door. It was thick and powerful, fierce and domineering, and exuded a powerful aura. Immediately, Ninglang pushed the power of his Xiaoshang sword to the limit. "Draw your sword?" Lin Feng smiled. "I had thought that you were a sword cultivator, and had some backbone. But now it seems that you are completely unworthy of my sword." Suddenly, a black and white taiji pattern appeared on his forehead, constantly intertwining and rotating. From the taiji diagram, tens of thousands of golden flames suddenly surged out, landing in the air, and instantly transforming into a fiery figure that faced Ninglang. Chapter 483. Lin Feng himself stood motionless on the spot. A taiji symbol appeared on his forehead, and from the taiji symbol, large amounts of golden flames surged out. These golden flames rapidly transformed into a giant that was more than 200 zhang tall in the air. Its entire body shone with a dazzling golden light, as though thousands of golden needles had gathered together. It was extremely glaring, and these golden needles were all extremely condensed flames. One of the 7 great true fires in the world, the true sunfire god light. The moment this flame giant appeared in the air, a violent feeling of power shook the entire void, shocking everyone. This golden flame giant's robes fluttered in the wind, and his outer appearance was exactly the same as Lin Feng's. His facial features were also the same as Lin Feng's, except that be it his clothes or skin, they were all formed from dazzling golden flames. A sun-like symbol gradually appeared on the forehead of the flame giant Lin Feng, as though it was burning fiercely on his forehead. Standing in the void, he was like the sun, incomparably dazzling. 4 symbols heaven opening scripture. Fire great sun god fist. Without waiting for sword venerable of broken mountains Ninglang to react, the golden flame giant Lin Feng directly punched out. The void suddenly exploded, and there was a fiery red. In the center of the spatial turbulence, there was only a blazing sun hanging high in the sky. Everything in the world returned to silence, and only this blazing sun shone like the sun in the sky, becoming the supreme ruler of this world, the one and only emperor. My light and heat give life to all living things, and my light and heat can also instantly destroy all living things. The life and death of all living things in the world depend on my words. Shushan's Xiaoshang sword was fierce and forceful, incomparably domineering. It was the most ferocious sword Dao mystique in the divine land, but at this moment, facing this punch from Lin Feng, it actually felt powerless. If you are domineering, I will be even more domineering. This was the concept of the power of this punch from Lin Feng. The huge bronze sword formed by Ninglang's primordial spirit seemed to have become a broken piece of straw at this moment, and was directly sent flying by Lin Feng's great sun god fist. The huge sword flew back thousands of li before it stopped moving. Its surface was covered in cracks like a spider web, and it was incomparably miserable. The edges of the sword began to shatter, and the giant sword wailed in despair. It was about to be completely shattered by Lin Feng's punch. Honorable swordsman Guanchong quickly flashed to the side of the huge sword. He used his own Guanchong sword intent and dermic powers to stabilize the huge sword that was about to shatter. This huge sword was Ninglang's primordial spirit incarnation. If he allowed it to shatter, Ninglang would die here. A first-tier essence soul sword cultivator, sword venerable of broken mountains, Ninglang of Mount Shu's Xiaoshang swordsmithing faction, was almost killed by Lin Feng with a single punch. Even sword venerable solar luminary, and the others were stunned by what they saw. When they looked at Lin Feng again, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Isn't he a sword cultivator? Why does my primordial spirit avatar look like this? Wait, that's not right. Sun luminary sword venerable's eyes widened. This isn't his nascent divinity incarnation at all. This is just one of his divine ability Dharmakaya. Ben Lazy, star constellation sword venerable, and the others gasped in unison. They saw 2 figures, one big and one small, standing in the void. The big one was naturally the giant formed from golden flames. The small one was standing silently behind the giant. It was Lin Feng himself. He was standing there perfectly fine, not revealing his primordial spirit avatar at all. The flame giant in front of him that had sent Ninglang flying with a single punch was completely formed from his dermic powers. It had nothing to do with his primordial spirit avatar at all. This golden flame giant was known as the Great Sun Emperor. It was a divine ability Dharmakaya that was formed from the fist will of the Great Sun Divine Fist, and his dermic powers of Lin Feng. It was the product of a divine ability Dharmakaya that had been cultivated to the extreme. Although its power was strong, it was only formed temporarily from dermic powers. It could not even be considered a clone. It could barely be considered an external body. However, its power was much weaker than the primordial spirit avatar that a cultivator could truly manifest. To be able to cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya, firstly, a primordial spirit cultivator had to cultivate their own divine ability Dharmakaya to the great perfection realm. Secondly, the divine ability itself had to be strong enough. There were very few techniques that could cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya. Other than Lin Feng, there were other primordial spirit experts who had condensed their own divine ability Dharmakaya. Divine ability Dharmakaya had many benefits. It could be gathered and dispersed at any time. Even if it was damaged, it would not harm the foundation. However, it was not often used during the crucial moments of life and death. This was because it could weaken the power of the primordial spirit avatar. Usually, when using a divine ability Dharmakaya, it was either the 2 parties were just testing each other, or when one party was far stronger than the other party, or when the main body could not leave, the divine ability Dharmakaya would travel far away and replace the main body to fight. However, for Lin Feng to use a divine ability Dharmakaya to almost shatter the primordial spirit avatar of Shushan's sword Venerable of Broken Mountains with a single punch. The power was truly terrifying. The void was distorted. Venerable Li Meng, who originally wanted to kill Venerable Flying Snow, gave up on his opponent and rushed towards Lin Feng. The sword will around his body surged and was extremely sharp. Last year, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain but was stopped by Taishu Temple. Today, I can finally get my wish. As Venerable Li Meng spoke, a dazzling cold light started surging from his body. In an instant, it was as though thousands of sword lights were shooting out from his body. His entire body was wrapped in sword lights, and he was filled with ferocity and killing intent. And in the void far away, a sword hum shook the sky. The brilliant sword lights were like the Milky Way flowing in reverse, tearing everything in front of it apart. It also slashed towards Lin Feng's head. It was Venerable Little Shang. He gave up on Venerable Flowing Light, who had been chasing after him, and also charged towards Lin Feng. Gathering chicken feathers to gather your courage. Ganging up on me? Lin Feng laughed. The divine ability avatar of the Great Sun Emperor in front of him waved its fist towards Venerable Little Shang. Lin Feng himself was still standing in the void, and the Taiji diagram on his forehead revolved again. Instantly, rays of jade light surged. As the waves surged, endless jade light extended towards the vast and boundless void. Very quickly, it turned into a jade green tide, boundless and boundless. In the void, a sea suddenly appeared out of nowhere. As the tide rolled, there were suddenly huge waves. In the sea, there was a huge whirlpool that kept revolving. A huge amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy was sucked into this huge whirlpool. The whirlpool became bigger and bigger, until it finally expanded to a radius of 100 miles. At the bottom of the deep whirlpool, there was suddenly a shocking energy wave. A tall figure gradually rose up. Similar to the Great Sun Emperor, he was also over 200 feet tall. His facial features and clothing were exactly the same as Lin Feng himself. It was just that this tall figure was completely jade green, and it shone with a bright luster. Another divine ability avatar? Venerable Li Meng's eyes flashed fiercely. His ferocious sword will suddenly exploded, turning into a fierce sword light that pierced towards the giant rising from the jade sea. The sword light was incomparably resplendent. Within the sword light, countless sword chi and sword intent surged, and the sword will turned into a physical form. It was even more shocking and ferocious than Venerable Little Shang's Little Shang sword. 4 symbols Heaven Opening Book, Water Boundless Sea Art. That jade green giant was called the Boundless Sea Emperor. It was a divine ability avatar formed from Lin Feng's Boundless Sea Art. Facing the fierce Venerable Li Meng, it immediately went up. Whoosh! What was shocking was that the Boundless Sea Emperor avatar, which looked no weaker than the Great Sun Emperor, was actually sliced in half by Venerable Li Meng's sword light. Could it be that it is just for show? Just as this thought rose in the minds of the crowd, they saw the jade waves below the Boundless Sea Emperor. As the waves surged, the Boundless Sea Emperor's already broken body rapidly recovered to its original state. Ben Lazy seemed to wake up from a dream. The Jade Sea is endless, but this body is indestructible, unless it can destroy the entire Jade Sea in one go. This divine ability avatar is immortal and can regenerate endlessly. Venerable Star Constellation Sword asked doubtfully, but how can it defeat the enemy with just strong regenerative abilities? At this moment, someone walked out from the Shushan camp. I will handle it. Martial Uncle, please attack the heart of the enemy. This was a great sword cultivator at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm. His name was Venerable Moon Reflector, and he was currently the strongest cultivator of the Great Yin Sword faction. The entire Shushan had high hopes for him. Once he reached the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, he would take over the title of Venerable Moon Sword Lord, and become the new sword master of the Great Yin Sword faction. In fact, he was now temporarily in charge of the daily affairs of the Great Yin Sword faction. This person unleashed his swordsmanship cultivation of the Taiyin sword, entangling the reformed Boundless Ocean Emperor like clouds and mist. Without needing Venerable Moon Reflector to say anything, Venerable Li Meng had already taken advantage of the moment the Boundless Sea Emperor was destroyed to bypass the Jade Sea and attack Lin Feng himself. But the next moment, all his hair stood on end. He turned back in shock and saw the reformed Boundless Sea Emperor forming a sword seal with his right hand. Countless sword gleams burst forth from his body, and the ferocious sword will made everyone pale with fright. It was not that this sword was strong, but that this sword was a living replica of Shushan's Venerable Li sword. How is this possible? Venerable Li Meng was undoubtedly the most shocked person. In the entire Shushan, other than the third-tier primordial spirit transformation realm sect Master Xian Longsheng, and a few Grand Supreme Elders, he was the strongest cultivator of the Venerable Li sword. He could tell at a glance whether the other party had imitated it, or had truly comprehended the essence of this sword Dao. Although it was still a little shaky, although there were some changes fundamentally, the sword that the Boundless Sea Emperor had used was the Venerable Li sword of Shushan. Venerable Moon Reflector hurriedly dodged, and Venerable Li Meng also forcefully stopped his forward momentum, evading the Boundless Sea Emperor's shocking sword. And the Boundless Sea Emperor's performance had just begun. After the Venerable Li sword, the sword seal changed, and the 200-meter-tall giant unleashed an incomparably gentle sword Dao. The sky was filled with sword qi, like clouds and mist. Venerable Moon Reflector almost vomited blood. Fuck. The Great Yin sword. It was extremely gentle, ethereal, and unpredictable sword will. The sword Dao that the Boundless Sea Emperor was currently using was another sword Dao of Shushan's 6 Meridians sword Dao, the Great Yin sword. From the sidelines, Ben Lazy and Venerable Star Constellation looked at each other. Even though they were on the same side as Lin Feng, they still felt bitter in their mouths. Could it be that anyone who fights with this Dharmakaya will instantly comprehend the mystique and spiritual arts? For a moment, everyone's gazes landed on Lin Feng, who was standing quietly in the void. They saw him smiling as he leisurely watched his 2 mystique clones fight with the 2 second-tier primordial spirit realm sword cultivators from the Shushan sword sect, who were in an earth-shattering battle. Chapter 484. The Boundless Ocean Emperor intimidated the crowd, and the Great Sun Emperor did not let him have the upper hand. A strong light burst forth from the Great Sun Emperor's body, and a bright light gathered in his palm, turning into a sun, rising up and shining brightly. In the next moment, this sun suddenly disappeared, like a heavenly dog swallowing the sun. Even the Great Sun Emperor's body formed from pure golden flames fell into darkness, like a black hole that swallowed up all light. In this darkness, the Great Sun Emperor's avatar gave off a terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate. Its power was condensed, like a calamity. It was as if as long as he willed it, he could destroy the space that everyone was in with a wave of his hand. Great Sun God Fist, Sun Eclipse Change. Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist was obtained after combining the power of the sun's true fire with the grand concept of the creation of heaven and earth. And it was extremely powerful. And this eclipse transformation's first transformation was to burn up the essence of sunlight and the true fire's divine light in an instant, so that one could instantly erupt with combat power that was far beyond ordinary. This extremely ferocious fist clashed with the Little Shang sword, and the result was that sword Venerable Little Shang was sent flying. The majestic sword light that was like the Milky Way shattered into thousands of streams of light, scattering in all directions. It was as if a treasured sword that could cut through metal like mud had clashed head-on with a huge hammer. No matter how sharp it was, it could not withstand such a violent collision. The Great Sun Yin Emperor's avatar wavered on the spot, and the power of the sun eclipse change dissipated. The flames lit up once more, and there were some places that had been slashed by the Shaoshang sword, but these wounds did not weaken the Great Sun Yin Emperor, but made him even more ferocious. The sword light dissipated, revealing a sword-wielding man with a strong aura. He was 100 feet tall, holding a huge sword, and had a stern face, his eyes like lightning. It was Sword Venerable Little Shang's Void Return avatar. At the last moment, Sword Venerable Little Shang displayed his strongest move, transforming his primordial spirit into a Void Return avatar, which was why he did not follow in Ninglang's footsteps, and was almost killed by Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist. Sword Venerable Guan Chong looked at this scene in shock. He has such powerful battle power just with his avatar. Could it be that back then in the Cloud Forest world, he was afraid of the complicated situation, so he wasn't willing to make a move? Or could it be that the one in Cloud Forest realm back then was simply just a clone of his? Taking a deep breath, Sword Venerable Guancheng suppressed all his questions and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about Sword Immortal anymore." Almost before he opened his mouth, Sword Lord Xiaoza, who had been suppressing old Sword Immortal in the distance, had already withdrawn. Like Sword Lord Xiaoshang, he abandoned his original opponent and charged toward Lin Feng. In the blink of an eye, the junior Sword Venerable crossed the endless space and arrived in front of Lin Feng. He snorted and transformed into a swordsman who was 20 feet tall, wearing a tall hat and ancient clothes. The long sword in his hand turned into a cold gleam. The cold light flashed and instantly turned into a sky full of starlight. In an instant, it traversed thousands of space-time and aimed at Lin Feng. Learning from Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng's lessons, Sword Lord Xiaoza revealed his void return dermic physique right from the start. On the other side, Sword Lord Guancheng disregarded the fact that his vital qi had yet to recover, and also revealed his void return dermic physique. He transformed into the image of a burly man who was 70 feet tall, and carried a huge sword. That huge sword was round and edgeless, looking like a huge iron bar. However, it possessed an aura that could suppress all nothingness and bear the weight of 1,000 caddies. In addition to Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng, the 4 great Void Return Realm Sword Masters of Mount Shu Sword Sect attacked Lin Feng together. Lin Feng still had a calm expression on his face. He raised his hand and lightly tapped the space between his eyebrows. 2 more powerful energy concepts rushed out from the Tai Chi runes on his forehead. When these 2 concepts landed in the void, they also instantly transformed into 2 huge human figures that were over 2,000 feet tall. Their facial features and appearance were exactly the same as Lin Feng, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Boundless Ocean Emperor. Shockingly, they were 2 of Lin Feng's divine ability dermic bodies again. For symbols heaven opening scripture wind divine time wind. 4 symbols heaven opening scripture earth heaven bearing seal. A formless, shadowless, and colorless storm condensed in the void, transforming into an almost transparent giant. This was the dermic body that Lin Feng had transformed from the Divine Time Wind divine ability. Its name was Divine Time Wind Emperor, and it went up to meet Sword Lord Xiaoshang. Sword Lord Xiaoshang used his sword will and spiritual power to the extreme. As the sword light changed, it transformed into a myriad of stars. This was not a feint, nor was it an illusion. Every sword light that was like a cold star was real. Just one sword strike was enough to severely injure, or even kill a primordial spirit transformation realm expert. Each ray of sword light represented a possibility in that instant. Facing Sword Lord Xiaoshang, Wind Emperor chanted, "The vicissitudes of the world in an instant. A flash of light has passed for 1,000 years." Power surged around him, and a sharp astral wind instantly swept through the surrounding space, enveloping all of Sword Lord Xiaoshang's sword light. There was a strange tremor in the space, and all the sword light disappeared. All that was left was a short swordsman wearing a high crown and ancient robes. The long sword in his hand was flashing with a cold light. All the onlookers were stunned. This was because they had just witnessed this scene. It was the exact moment when Sword Lord Xiaoshang was about to unleash his return to void stage Dharma body. In the next instant, the tip of the long sword in his hand transformed into a cold light, and it was about to transform into thousands of sword lights that entered different planes of time to assassinate Lin Feng. But now, this scene was replaying before everyone's eyes. Sword Lord Solar Luminary, and the others naturally didn't think that they were seeing things, or that they were hallucinating. There was only one reason for this, and that was that Wind Emperor Xiaoshang's power had forcibly reversed the flow of time in the space where Sword Lord Xiaoshang had just been. Although it was only for a short instant, it was already astonishing enough. Sword Lord Xiaoshang was a sword cultivator of the Return to Void stage, and he had also cultivated in a divine ability like Sword Lord Xiaoshang. He had also comprehended some of the mysteries of time. His consciousness was extremely clear, and he immediately understood what had happened. However, Wind Emperor Xiaoshang had already taken advantage of this opportunity, to close in on Sword Lord Xiaoshang before Sword Lord Xiaoshang could unleash its power. Powerful gales of wind swept violently toward Sword Lord Xiaoshang's return to void stage Dharma body, forcing Sword Lord Xiaoshang into a sorry state. Meanwhile, on the other side, streaks of earthy yellow light converged to form a mighty giant. The giant made a seal with both hands before crushing down toward Sword Lord Guanchong. A powerful power intent realm emanated from the giant's body. It wasn't sharp or ferocious, but it was extremely heavy, powerful, and indestructible. It was like the earth that bore the weight of the heavens and nurtured all things. Any power that fell upon the earth would be able to withstand it. At the same time, the earth was also extremely heavy, capable of suppressing all things and preventing them from wreaking havoc. The return to void stage Dharma body manifested by Sword Lord Guanchong advanced toward Lin Feng step by step with the ancient and solemn sword intent of Sword Lord Guanchong. However, he didn't expect to encounter Lin Feng's Dharma body, Emperor of Heaven and Earth, which was condensed from the heaven-bearing seal divine ability. It was a battle of clumsiness against clumsiness, a battle of great ingenuity against great ingenuity. Even though Sword Lord Guanchong had unleashed his own sword realm, he was still unable to withstand the increasingly heavy pressure. In the Mount Shu sword sect's camp, a middle-aged man with a calm and composed aura unsheathed his sword to assist Sword Lord Guanchong. The sword projection he unleashed was pure gold. It wasn't ostentatious or sharp. Instead, it was calm and heavy, like a mountain that could hold up the seas and the heavens. However, in the face of this sword, many people felt as if they were a head shorter. They felt guilty and could only kneel down obediently, repent their sins, and peacefully await execution. The Xiaoyang sword was the most neutral and peaceful sword among the 6 lineages of Mount Shu. It was the most difficult to cultivate, but after mastering it, it would be flawless and without any flaws. It was widely recognized as the strongest of the 6 lineages. Sword Lord Xiaoyang was guarding his hometown in Mount Shu and didn't come to Tianjia Peak. However, there was someone from the Xiaoyang sword sect who came with Sword Lord Guanchong and the others. It was the #1 expert of the Xiaoyang sword sect, second only to the sword master, Sword Lord Qingtian. Although he was only at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, his aura was as imposing as a mountain. Even the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, Sword Lord Flying Snow, and Sword Lord Streamlight, didn't dare to underestimate him. Sword Lord Qingtian wanted to use the Xiaoyang sword to assist Sword Lord Guanchong to break through Lin Feng's Emperor of Heaven's seal. However, Lin Feng didn't take it to heart at all. The 200-jong tall Emperor of Heaven and Earth formed a seal with both hands and continued to press down, directly suppressing Sword Lord Qingtian. The neutral and calm golden sword light couldn't hold on under the immense power of the divine land, and kept trembling. Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Xiaoza joined in the siege against Lin Feng. Sword Lord Streamlight and Sword Lord Old Immortal were able to extricate themselves and return to the side of Sword Lord Solar Luminary and the others. Everyone looked at everything that was happening in front of them in shock. They saw Lin Feng with his hands behind his back. He had a calm expression on his face, and there was even a relaxed smile on his lips. As for the 4 divine ability avatars that he manifested, they each displayed their unique abilities. Not only did they fight against Sword Lord Xiaoshang, Sword Lord Xiaoza, Sword Lord Guanchong, and Sword Lord Li Xiong, they even brought Sword Lord Moonreflector and Sword Lord Qingtian along with them. Fighting 1 against 6, he suppressed 6 primordial spirit transformation realm sword cultivators of Mount Shu and gained the upper hand. Even until now, Lin Feng hadn't revealed his primordial spirit incarnation. Sword Lord Flying Snow's aura was waning. Chapter 485. Get into formation. Following Honorable Swordsman Xiaoshang's shout, Honorable Swordsman Li Meng, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe, and Honorable Swordsman Guanchong all retreated. Both Sword Venerable Reaching Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine pinched their swords with solemn expressions and shouted in unison, "Go!" A sword cry rang out as 2 majestic sword lights soared into the sky. One was calm and steady while the other was unpredictable. They actually forcefully blocked the attacks of the Boundless Ocean Emperor and the Earth Emperor. Such strength was not something a First Firmament Essence Soul Sword cultivator should have. Everyone looked at each other. An old sword immortal said in a deep voice, "It's the Xiaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword." At that moment, Sword Venerable Qingtian and Sword Venerable Moonshine revealed their essence spirit incarnations and placed their essence spirits completely on the two swords. They were two magical treasures, flying swords. They were majestic and powerful, as if endless sword intent was spreading out in all directions. They were not something that ordinary magical treasures could match. Everyone in the world knew that Shu Mountain had the immortal heaven sword, the most powerful killing treasure in the divine land. It was extremely powerful and could control the fate of Shu Mountain. It had been more than 4,000 years since the last war between the two worlds. Below the immortal heaven sword, Shu Mountain also had the 6 meridian immortal swords, which were controlled by the sword masters and grandmasters of the 6 meridian swords. They were also powerful magical treasures that were world famous. They had been refined by the descendants of the 6 meridian swords for tens of thousands of years, and were constantly strengthened. Furthermore, they were worshipped by countless disciples of Shu Mountain. Any one of them had the power to split the sky and earth. And now, 2 of the 6 meridian celestial swords had appeared before their eyes. The Xiaoyang sword was the most precious treasure of Shu Mountain's Xiaoyang sword lineage. The sword was 10 feet long, and the blade was 1 foot wide. The sword's body was simple and dignified, and it was oval like a pillar. There were no edges on either side of the sword, only a sharp tip. It symbolized a dignified and righteous aura, not using killing power to subdue others. It was perfect and flawless, and the benevolent were invincible. The Taiyin sword was the inherited treasure of Mount Shu's Taiyin sword branch. Only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye, and the blade could not be seen. Above the hilt floated layers of clouds and mist, making it hard to grasp. Amidst the clouds and mist, a bright sword light could be vaguely seen. It was like moonlight, waxing and waning, ever-changing. The sword master of Mount Shu's 6 meridian swords, venerated lunar swordsman, had already fallen. Venerated Xiaoyang swordsman stayed in Mount Shu, and did not come out. There were only 4 6 meridian swordmasters present. However, Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine brought the Xiaoyang sword and the Moon Reflection sword with them. They did not use them before because it was too much of a burden for them to wield the 2 swords with their cultivation. But now, it did not matter. The 2 of them had brought out their respective treasures from the sword lineage in order to cooperate with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang, and the other 3 to set up the Mount Shu Sword Sect's famous 6 meridians heavenly immortal sword formation. Honorable Swordsman Xiao Shang, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe, Honorable Swordsman Li, Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong, Honorable Swordsman Qing Tian, who controlled the Xiaoyang sword, and Honorable Swordsman Ing Yu who controlled the Taiyin sword. The 6 of them formed a hexagon and stood at each corner, forming a formation. Instantly, a murderous aura filled the air, causing the space to tremble. 6 pillars of light shot into the sky with Sword Venerable Little Shang, and the others at the center. Each pillar of light contained an extreme sword Dao. The pillar of light with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang at the center was the thickest. Cold light flashed, shocking one's soul. The sword intent was the most ferocious and violent, as though it could destroy everything in the world. And in the pillar of light conjured by Honorable Swordsman Little Shang, countless spatial fragments resonated with each other. They were crystal clear, and the power of time was infused into them. Countless lights and shadows flashed. Honorable Swordsman Guanchong stood silently in the void. The pillar of light around him was pure black, like a hard rock or iron. It was extremely dignified, like a heavenly pillar that supported the heavens. The pillar of light around Honorable Swordsman Fierce Li was the weakest. It was not even comparable to the first-tier essence Soul Realm Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine. However, the seemingly weak pillar of light contained the fiercest murderous aura. It was the strongest of the 6 swords. Sword Venerable Soaring Sky had completely placed his primordial spirit on the Xiaoyang sword. The Xiaoyang sword floated calmly in the air with its tip pointed upwards. The majestic and peaceful sword light was filled with the majestic aura of the Tao of Kings. It did not allow anyone to offend it. Sword Venerable Moonshine was the same as Sword Venerable Soaring Sky. He had also placed his primordial spirit on the Taiyin sword. His was the most unique among the 6 swords. The other 5 swords were sword-light, but his was still a cloud-like sword chi. It floated up into the sky like a cloud pillar. The 6 swords of Shushan gathered together, pushing their sword intent and spiritual power to the extreme. The terrifying sword intent combined and pierced through the void for thousands of miles. Even space was torn apart, and the cracks were dotted with stars, revealing the distant starry sea of the universe. What was even more terrifying was that the sword intent of the 6 pulse swords of Shushan was constantly fusing with each other, growing and stimulating each other. Just the fusion of the 2 swords had already increased their power to a terrifying level. Now that the 6 swords were resonating together, the sword intent and spiritual power were constantly rising at a geometrical speed. The 6-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan was a famous killing formation in the Divine Land. In the history of the human cultivation world, every time this formation was used, a primordial spirit expert would definitely fall to it. It had never failed. Old Sword Immortal looked at this shocking scene and sighed. The 6-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan is really terrifying. The Heavenly Sword sect was second in the 9 Heavenly Sword League. They had been constantly developing and strengthening their strength, hoping to one day challenge the position of Shushan and ascend to the throne of the #1 Holy Land of Swordsmanship. However, this was destined to be a distant dream for a very long time. Sword Venerable Sunlight said in a deep voice, "They specially brought the Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword here to set up this sword formation. What will the master of the Taoist sect do?" The others all looked at Lin Feng, only to see Lin Feng watching with interest as the 6-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan took shape. He's actually not stopping the other party from setting up the formation? Isn't that a little too arrogant? Since Lin Feng did not move, Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others naturally would not stand on ceremony. The spiritual power of the 6 surged together, and the 6 ultimate sword intents fused into one, forming a white chaotic whole. The white chaotic whole swirled with air currents, and an extremely terrifying power was being born from within. Ben Lazy smiled sadly. It's here. Heavenly immortal sword chi. It's finally here. This is the true terror of the 6-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation. Although the 6-pulse swords of Shushan each walked an extreme path, they actually came from the same source. They were the supreme swords of Shushan, the heavenly immortal sword chi. The 6-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation's infamy had spread throughout the great heaven primordial world, because when the formation was activated to its extreme, the 6 swords would become one, and the heavenly immortal sword chi could be unleashed. Finally, an extremely fine sword chi shot out from the white chaotic hole, heading straight for Lin Feng. The sword chi looked extremely weak, like a gentle breeze, but it was extremely terrifying. It contained a grand power that could pierce through the heavens and earth, and could evolve into thousands of swords. It was the ultimate sublimation of thousands of swords into one, and it was also the starting point and source of all swords in the world. It was both the starting point and the final destination. The moment this sword chi appeared, everyone present grunted. Be it the 2nd-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators Old Sword Immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, Celeritas Swordsman, or the 1st-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators Sword Venerable Sun, Sword Venerable Constellation, or Ben Lazy, all of them trembled violently. It was as if the depths of their souls had been shaken, and they had a feeling of wanting to submit. That was the sword intent that they had attained Tao stirring. It was like the most primal instinct, like a rabbit seeing a lion, or a mantis seeing an oriole. In the mortal world, between rulers and subjects, the ruler wanted the subject to die, and the subject had no choice but to die. And the source of all this was that seemingly weak, but in fact extremely terrifying sword chi. Heavenly immortal sword chi. Once the heavenly immortal sword appeared, all swords would submit. This sword was undoubtedly the emperor of swords in the great heaven primordial world. Once it appeared, all swords would return to their roots and fight to worship it. The Yuanying sword cultivator from the Songhai sword sect spat out a mouthful of blood. Yuanying was almost shaken out of his body. Old Sword Immortal and the other great sword cultivators at the primordial spirit realm had extremely ugly expressions. They could still resist the pressure from the heavenly immortal sword qi, but they also felt extremely uncomfortable. Other than the discomfort of their primordial spirit dharmic powers, they felt even more humiliated on a spiritual level. Why did most sword Dao sects more or less have the intention to resist Shu Mountain? Because to them, if they did not resist, they could only gradually become vassals of Shu Mountain. To these experts who had attained the primordial spirit realm, when faced with such an enemy, their first reaction would never be to submit. They would only think of ways to unite and destroy this opponent. But every time they truly faced the heavenly immortal sword qi, they would all feel a deep sense of despair. And now, this terrifying heavenly immortal sword qi was cleaving down on Lin Feng's head. The concept of power contained in the sword qi was extremely pure and simple. It wanted to pierce through all obstacles in front of it. All obstructions were futile. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, Sword Venerable Guanchong, Sword Venerable Li Xiong, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Moon Reflection. The 6 great sword cultivators shouted in unison. All swords in the world come out of Shu Mountain. Master of the Mystic Gate, take our heavenly immortal sword qi. Back in the cloudy forest realm, Lin Feng did not take the heavenly immortal sword qi head-on. When facing the Shu Mountain sword sect leader Xian Longxing's heavenly immortal sword qi, facing this heaven primordial first sword again, Lin Feng's lips suddenly curled into a smile. If it was Xian Longxing, it might be possible. You guys can't do it. Lin Feng's main body finally moved. With a light clap of his palms, the sky-bearing Emperor of Earth, the Boundless Ocean Emperor, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Time-Light Emperor of Wind, the 4 huge avatars of over 600 Zhongtal shattered at the same time. Endless, surging earth, water, fire, and wind churned the entire void into a chaotic mess. But this time, Lin Feng did not allow the 4 images to go berserk. Instead, he used his own dharmic powers to stabilize the 4 images. The earth, water, fire, and wind returned to their original positions and became balanced again. In the void turbulence, something that looked like a bubble appeared. Lin Feng stretched out his finger and tapped the bubble lightly. The bubble instantly burst, and 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out. An incomparably powerful force flowed out from it. That was the origin of the world, the beginning of a place's creation. It was a powerful force that could split the heavens and earth apart. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Primordial heaven splitting technique. The majestic force that split the heavens and earth apart met the heavenly immortal sword qi of Shu Mountain's 6th meridian heavenly immortal sword formation. Chapter 486. With a flick of Lin Feng's finger, the bubble burst. 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out, and a powerful intent of splitting the heavens and earth manifested. The turbid air sank, settling and condensing, solidifying into a physical form. It transformed into the earth, then into mountains and rivers. The clear air rose, vast and mysterious. It transformed into the sky, then into the stars, the sun, and the moon. The immense power that rearranged the earth, water, fire, and wind, and separated the heavens and earth, directly suppressed the heavenly immortal sword qi that Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others had unleashed through the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The Tai Chi diagram on Lin Feng's forehead spun continuously, and his spiritual power surged, transforming into an almost unstoppable attack. It was like the tide of time, crushing and drowning all opponents who dared to try and stop a chariot. At this moment, even the mysterious heavenly immortal sword qi had met an opponent that it could not penetrate. It was as if it was being suppressed by a world, and it was being pushed back. Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The unstoppable power of the heavenly immortal sword qi was all crushing down on the 6 of them. The majestic intent of splitting the heavens and earth instantly made them suffer unspeakably. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, and Sword Venerable Li Xiong were fine, but Sword Venerable Guanchong, who had yet to recover, and Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were in big trouble. The primordial spirits of Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were directly separated from the Xiaoyang Sword and Taiyin Sword. Their primordial spirits were extremely weak, and they were completely relying on the two immortal swords to continue supporting the sword formation. Sword Venerable Guanchong had no choice but to manifest his Void Return Dharma body to support the sword formation. Void Return Dharma bodies were extremely precious. Although they were powerful, once they were damaged, it would cause great harm to the primordial spirit cultivator, and it was extremely difficult to repair. But Sword Venerable Guanchong could not care so much at this moment, because the pressure on them from Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique was increasing. The power of the world created by the clear and the other turbid had already pressed down on the white hole above the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The other primordial spirit experts of the Shushan sword sect who had come along were watching the terrifying battle from afar. They were all shaken. They had not expected the 6th meridian immortal heavenly sword formation to be suppressed by Lin Feng. In the entire Mount Shu sword sect, other than the Great Mountain Guarding formation and the Great Immortal Manifestation sword formation, the 6th meridian heavenly immortal sword formation was the strongest killing formation. In the entire heaven primal world, it was also one of the few fearsome formations, but now it was about to be defeated. Swordsman Reaching Sky and Swordsman Mirror Moon were all seriously injured. Swordsman Guanchong and the other three could only hold on bitterly. The dignified Shushan sword sect, with so many experts, was beaten to this point by one person alone. Sword Venerable Broken Mountain Ning Lang, who had narrowly escaped death and was now severely injured and weak, looked at Lin Feng in a daze. I actually provoke such a person time and time again? When Old Immortal Sword, Sword Reverend Flying Snow, Sword Reverend Sunlight, and the others saw this, they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. Mount Shu had come prepared this time. With a large army, it was almost as if they wanted to crush all the participants of this gathering with the strength of a single sect. But now, it was Lin Feng who had crushed all the Mount Shu cultivators present with his strength alone. One-on-one, ganging up on him, and finally forming a large formation to gang up on him. But it was all in vain. Against Lin Feng, who could take on a large formation with his bare hands, Mount Shu could only swallow the bitter pill of defeat. Seeing Lin Feng single-handedly suppress the 6th meridian heavenly immortal sword formation formed by the 6 experts of Mount Shu, Old Immortal Sword and the others were in awe. 3rd-tier primordial spirit transformation realm. Other than that, there is no other possibility. Ben Lazy turned to look at Old Immortal Sword. The master of the Mystic Gate is definitely an expert no weaker than the Great Voids Yen Nanlai and Mount Shu's Xian Longsheng. Slowly, Old Immortal Sword nodded. Previously, when the Heavenly Sword Sect contacted the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, they had made many guesses about Lin Feng's cultivation. Initially, they thought that they had overestimated Lin Feng, who knew that in the end, they had still underestimated him. Sword Reverend Flying Snow and Sword Reverend Sunlight exchanged glances. Everything that has happened today must be reported to His Majesty, the Emperor of Qin. Everything that has happened in the past about Xianmen Tianzong must be re-evaluated. That's right. The comparison of strength between Xianmen Tianzong and Mount Shu Sword Sect must be adjusted. Not to mention his mountain sect and the many monstrous disciples under him. Just the existence of the Master of the Mystic Gate alone is enough to make Xianmen Tianzong a top force that can fight against Mount Shu. Compared to the others who were overthinking things, Venerable Streamlight only felt his mind go blank. He was an extremely proud person. Because of the conflict between Xiao Yan and Morong Yan Ran, the Streamlight Sword Sect had lost a lot of face. Therefore, he had always hoped to have a battle with Lin Feng. Originally, he thought that he had kept a trump card. After breaking through to the 2nd tier of the Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm, and reaching the Void Return Realm, he would be able to redeem himself. But now, it seemed like all of this was a joke. Such a huge difference made even Venerable Streamlight dazed for a moment. After a while he came to his senses, laughed bitterly, and shook his head repeatedly. The thoughts of the people around him were undulating as their imaginations ran wild. Meanwhile, the 6 great sword cultivators of Mount Shu within the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation were almost at the brink of life and death. After Venerable Guanchong manifested his Void Return Realm dermic body, his entire body was trembling. At this moment, Under the immense pressure, his void return realm dermic body was directly crushed. For a second-tier primordial spirit transformation realm cultivator, the void return realm dermic body was the foundation of achieving Tao. And now, Venerable Guanchong's void return realm dermic body was directly crushed under the pressure of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. Thousands of years of hard work had been destroyed in an instant. With the void return realm dermic body shattered, the cultivation level of a second-tier primordial spirit transformation realm cultivator would directly fall back to the first-tier primordial spirit transformation realm. Of the 6th Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation, Guanchong's sword formation master, Venerable Guanchong, had been instantly beaten back to the primordial spirit transformation realm by Lin Feng. And this was just the beginning. Very soon, Venerable Xiaoshang and the others were also forced to reveal their void return realm dermic bodies. The 6th Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation was in imminent danger. At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the void. A huge giant with white light flashing all over his body stepped out from within. The giant had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His face was fair and clean, and his facial features were ordinary. However, his vast sword will made everyone look at him. This was a powerful concept that was not inferior to Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. It was as if the heavens and earth had yet to be created, born from the primordial chaos. This sword would cleave the primordial chaos apart and create a new world. This was the concept possessed by the true immortal heaven sword Qi. Venerable Xiaoshang and the others had not truly cultivated the immortal heaven sword Qi, and had only barely activated it through the combined power of the 6 meridians. At this moment, the white giant's energy waves were not as powerful as the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation, but it had truly grasped the essence of the immortal heaven sword Qi. Venerable Sun Luminary took a deep breath. Its Xian Longxing's thaumaturgy body, the immortal heaven sword sovereign. The white giant's facial features and appearance were none other than the current sect master of the Shu Mountain Sword Sect, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, Xian Longxing. Just like how Lin Feng had used his great sun god fist and other thaumaturgy bodies to form the grand sun flame monarch, the one that had arrived was also one of Xian Longxing's thaumaturgy bodies. It was the immortal heaven sword sovereign formed from immortal heaven sword Qi. The immortal heaven sword sovereign didn't say anything. His figure flashed and directly entered the white hole created by the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The power of the white hole suddenly surged. A majestic immortal heaven sword sovereign shot out and resisted the power of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. It was no longer a weak sword energy like a gentle breeze, but a majestic stream of stars. At this moment, the immortal heaven sword sovereign revealed its ferocious and domineering nature. The white hole created by the sword formation was unable to exert its full power. But now, with the immortal heaven sword sovereign leading it, it immediately became ferocious and murderous. It met attack with attack and blocked Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. Old Sword Immortal and the others became nervous. Even though it was only a thaumaturgy body and not his real body, Xian Longxing still exerted great pressure on them. The sect master of Shu Mountain, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, the #1 sword Dao in the heaven primordial spirit transformation realm. Lin Feng looked at this scene, but he did not panic. Instead, he smiled slightly. Shushan sword Dao lives up to its name. It's just a pity. All the swords in the world come from Shu Mountain, but my sword is beyond the heavens. Lin Feng silently raised his right hand. His index and middle fingers formed a sword and pointed at the sky. A terrifying sword intent capable of destroying the world emerged. If there was life in the void, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the stars, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the earth, this sword would exterminate it. It wasn't targeted at a single living entity, but rather the entire grand Tao of heaven and earth, the world of creation, to be annihilated. It was different from Shu Mountain's sword Dao, or any other killing sword in this world. It was a sword that could punish the heavens, a sword that could destroy the world. In Lin Feng's Sea of Knowledge, the heavenly virtue scripture visualized a good fortune bell. Its form rapidly changed, going through the life creation gate, the River of Time, and the Book of Destruction. After the Book of Destruction, it reached its end and turned into nothingness. At this time, there was no need for the Life Creation Gate, no need for the River of Time, and no need for the Book of Destruction. All that was needed was destruction, extermination. To kill everything, to destroy everything into nothingness. The most terrifying power to destroy everything, to turn everything into nothingness, to cease to exist, to not leave a single trace. At the fingertips of Lin Feng's right hand, 2 streams of mana, one black and one white, continuously revolved, transforming into a yin and yang yin Tai Chi pattern. At the center of the Tai Chi pattern, a gray sword tip slowly rose up from within, bringing with it a power that made the world tremble. This is the sword intent that Lin Feng comprehended from that peerless ominous sword. After fusing it with his own cultivation level and understanding of the Tao, this is a form of sword Tao that Lin Feng has mastered and mastered. Today is the first time it has appeared in the Heaven Primal World. What it challenges is the original number 1 sword Tao ability of the Heaven Primal World. This sword of mine is called the Heaven Punishing Sword Qi. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist Xian Longsheng. Lin Feng's tone was calm. His fingers moved, and a gray sword Qi shot towards the white hole formed by the 6 meridians Immortal Heaven Sword formation. Your name is Immortal Heaven, my name is Heaven Punishing Sword. The gray sword Qi was extremely terrifying. Everywhere it passed, space was reduced to nothingness, no longer existing. The white hole let out an earth-shattering howl, and a violent Immortal Heaven Sword Qi shot out from it. Like an enraged king, it did not retreat, and faced the challenge of the Heaven Punishing Sword Qi head-on. Chapter 487. 1 gray and 1 white sword energy collided. The void violently twisted as if a hole had been created, and the 2 sword energies poured into it. The hole exploded and countless sword energies flew in all directions, sweeping through all obstacles in their path. The void was connected to the distant universe, and countless small stars were destroyed and reduced to dust by the shockwaves of the Immortal Heavenly Sword Qi and Heaven Punishing Sword Qi. Even large and medium-sized stars were affected and shook violently. Be it Venerable Sword Soaring Snow, Venerable Sword Luminary, or the other Shushan sword cultivators, all of them retreated rapidly. At the same time, they activated their sword will and spiritual power to protect themselves from being caught in the crossfire. Just the shockwaves from the collision are already so powerful. Immortal Sword slowly nodded. Heavenly Immortal Sword energies, we finally have a worthy opponent. Ben Lazy grunted. From now on, Shu Mountain can no longer claim to be number 1 in the world in the way of the sword. As he spoke, the space at the center of the collision continued to distort and shatter. The terrifying gray sword energy once again poked its head out from the hole. It was Lin Feng's Heaven Punishing Sword energies. After resisting the Heavenly Immortal Sword energies, the Heaven Punishing Sword energies still had some power left. It turned into a terrifying sword energy that continued forward. Under the horrified gazes of the Shushan crowd, the gray sword Qi slashed at the white hole and directly pierced through it. As if the world was collapsing, the white hole collapsed. Sword Venerable Little Shang, and the others that formed the 6 Meridian Immortal Sword formation, all cried out in pain. Both the return to void Dharma physiques and primordial spirit avatars were cracking inch by inch. Light energy shot out continuously as if their flesh was spewing out blood. All 6 primordial spirit cultivators were gravely injured. The 6 Meridian Immortal Sword formation that dominated the heavens' origin for countless years and caused countless experts to be alarmed was broken. The white hole shattered and the terrifying gray sword energy flashed in the air. It didn't dissipate and continued to slash down. With a flash of light, Sect Master Xian Longsheng's avatar, the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign, appeared in the air again. However, at this moment, the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign was also weakened and on the verge of destruction. The Immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body turned into a vast expanse of white sword energy that enveloped Sword Venerable Little Shang's group of 6, as well as the other Shu Mountain cultivators. A supreme sword intent broke through the void, wanting to send everyone back to Shu Mountain. However, the Heaven Punishing Sword energy was too terrifying. It directly cut through the Immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body and cut him in half. This sword completely destroyed Xian Longxing's divine ability Dharma body. The #1 holy land of swordsmanship in the world, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the dignified sect leader had his Dharmakaya destroyed. It was truly a great humiliation. Apart from the war between the two worlds, the number of times such a situation had happened since ancient times could be counted on one hand. What angered them even more was that the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's avatar was destroyed and the spatial passage was about to close. All of them would be trapped here. At this moment, the void passageway that was about to close, on the other side of the passageway, a sword light suddenly appeared, opening up the passageway once again. Someone used powerful magic power to sweep up Sword Venerable, Little Shang, and the others, preparing to take them away. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Xian Longxing, I won't make things difficult for you if you take them away, not because they don't have a path of death, but rather because killing them would damage the overall strength of the human cultivation path, giving the demon race a free advantage. In the future, if we fight against the demon race, we will still need their help, so I will be lenient today. However, your Shu Mountain is too overbearing, wanting to leave without paying any price. How could it be so simple? Lin Feng's right hand slashed in the air. Heavenly Realm Barrier. Suddenly, the powerful Dharma power prohibition isolated the void. The sword light that Xian Longxing used to guide the people of Shu Mountain trembled violently and burst into countless streams of light. Within that stream of light, there were two rays of light that were the most dazzling. Lin Feng changed the All-Celestial Realm Barrier spell into the All-Celestial Capture. Layers of spatial power transformed into a huge palm, forcefully capturing those two rays of light. After the light dissipated, the two things that were caught by the giant palm were two swords. One of them was 1 meter long and 1 foot wide. Its body was simple and dignified with an oval-shaped body like a pillar. There were no edges on either side, only a sharp tip. As for the other sword, only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye. Layers of mist floated above the hilt, making it difficult to grasp. Inside, one could vaguely see bright sword rays flashing in an ever-changing manner. These were the Yang Sword and Extreme Yin Sword of Shu Mountain's 6 Meridians immortal swords. These two swords were top-flying treasures, so how could they be captured by Lin Feng? They violently struggled, but Lin Feng calmly used the Heavenly Grand Capture to capture them. Then he used his Heavenly Minor World technique to create a violet world and threw the two swords inside. Next, the Heaven Bearer Seal's magical art activated and suppressed the two swords from 3 different directions. In the void, Xian Longxing's sword energy took Sword Venerable Little Shang's group away. Waves of sword energy condensed into a figure in the air, another immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. It had the same facial features as Xian Longxing. At this moment, it was expressionlessly looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng's expression was indifferent as he calmly stared back at the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. Sword Venerable Sun's group was far away and silently watched the two big shots. The atmosphere was so tense that it felt like it was about to freeze. What they had seen and heard today had a great impact on them. They were supposed to be facing Shu Mountain, and were about to suffer a crushing defeat and lose face. Even Sword Venerable Flying Snow almost lost his life. But who knew that in the end, it would become a battle between Lin Feng and the Shushan Sword Sect. The result of the battle was even more shocking. With Lin Feng's strength alone, he turned the tide and defeated the people of Shushan. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Guanchong, Sword Venerable Shaoza, Sword Venerable Li Meng, Sword Venerable Moonshine, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Swordsman Ning Lang of Broken Mountain. The 7 experts were all seriously injured. Among them, Sword Venerable Guanchong had his return to void physique destroyed, and his cultivation level dropped. The Xiaoyang Sword and the Taiying Sword, 2 of the 6 Meridian immortal swords of Shushan, the legacy treasures of the Xiaoyang and Taiying Sword lineages of the 6 Meridian swords of Shushan, were also seized by Lin Feng. This was practically equivalent to breaking the foundation of the Xiaoyang and Taiying swords. How many years had it been since the Shu Mountain Sword Sect suffered such a great loss? If not for Sect Master Xian Longxing's timely arrival, the dozen or so Shushan sword cultivators at the Primordial Soul Realm would have perished here. Among them were Sword Venerable Xiaoshang, and 4 other sword masters at the 2nd tier of the Primordial Soul Realm. Even though the Mount Shu sword sect was a powerful sect, it could not afford such a loss. In today's battle, Lin Feng almost broke the backbone of the entire Shu mountain. Xian Longxing's immortal heaven sword Lord Avatar stared at Lin Feng expressionlessly and said slowly, "There is no need to say more. Lin Feng, I will leave the Xiaoyang and Taiyin swords with you for now. Shu mountain will soon take them back." Lin Feng chuckled and said calmly, "Why go through so much trouble? When I have time in the future, I will personally go to Shu mountain and see the scenery of western Shu. At that time, I will have to trouble fellow Taoist Xian Longxing to not reject me." Lin Feng's words naturally did not mean that he would voluntarily return the Xiaoyang and Taiyin swords to their rightful owners and apologize. Old Sword Immortal and the others gasped in unison. This Taoist master of the Taoist gate meant that not only would he hand over the other party's immortal swords, he would also take the initiative to attack the other party's mountain? Didn't he know that there was one of the strongest spirit formations in the human world of the Divine Land? The Great Immortal Heaven Sword Formation? Didn't he know that there was the mountain treasure of Shu Mountain, the top killing treasure of the Divine Land, the Supreme Immortal Heaven Sword? Didn't he know that other than Xian Longxing, there was more than one Grand Supreme Elder of Shu Mountain at the third tier of Primordial Spirit Realm, who had always been in seclusion? Before this, the Taoist Gate Master seemed to have only relied on his own magic power and abilities to fight against Shu Mountain. Star Constellation Sword Venerable said slowly. He didn't use any magic treasures, not even his primordial spirit avatar. Sun Glory Sword Venerable and the others looked at each other. He still has that terrifying Jade Capital Mountain. At this point, they suddenly felt that Lin Feng's domineering presence at Shu Mountain was not that hard to imagine. However, the primordial spirit sword Venerable felt a bit bitter in their mouths. So the Taoist Gate Master is actually this powerful? Xian Longxing's immortal heaven sword Venerable stared at Lin Feng and slightly nodded. "I'm afraid I will be the first to go to Kunlun to find you. At that time, don't try to avoid me." With that, the immortal heaven sword Venerable disappeared into the void. With the disappearance of the immortal heaven sword Venerable's gigantic body, the battle finally came to an end. Old Sword Immortal and the rest felt a little more relaxed. The four sword masters of the Shushan sword sect, and even the sect leader Xian Longxing, who had appeared at the end, had given them too much pressure. But while they were relaxed, they were also a little disappointed. It's a pity that Xian Longxing himself seems to be busy, and could only come here with his sword will avatar. Exalted Sword Luminary thought. Otherwise we would be fortunate enough to witness a true pinnacle of sword arts. Not only him, but everyone else also had the same thought. However, they quickly calmed down and went up to greet Lin Feng. Although they didn't say it out loud, they all expressed their gratitude. It was the same for Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow and Venerable Sun Luminary. Especially Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow. If not for Lin Feng appearing in time, with Venerable Swordsman Li's ferocious nature, he would have definitely chased after Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow until he died. However, the two of them didn't feel good. This gathering was clearly led by the Qin dynasty, but it ended anticlimactic. They were almost humiliated by the Shu Mountain Sword Sect's army. In the end, they managed to regain their face, but it was Lin Feng who acted as a guest. This made the two of them feel ashamed. No matter what, I have to report everything that happened today. Sword Venerable Flying Snow's thought was also the most urgent thought in everyone's mind. Very soon, the process and results of this battle were reported to the participating forces at the first possible moment, and all the major forces fell into shock and silence. At the northern part of the Qin dynasty's capital, Western Tomb City, the door to Prime Minister Wu Qingrou's study was currently closed. Wu Qingrou's confidants all knew that only when Wu Qingrou encountered a headache that he couldn't make a decision on would he close the door and stay in the study alone. This was extremely rare, and this time the door was closed for an unprecedentedly long time. Chapter 488. The door to Wu Qingrou's study was closed. The master was alone in the study. Silently, a young man stood outside the study, waiting patiently. He knew that Wu Qingrou needed time to think. "I thought it would be a draw. who knew that Shu Mountain would suffer a crushing defeat. The young man knew why Wu Qingru was deep in thought. It was because of the news he brought. In fact, the young man was shocked when he first received the news. It wasn't that he didn't think that Lin Feng could win, but he didn't expect the situation to be completely one-sided. After a long time, the door suddenly opened. Wu Qingru's calm voice came from inside. "Come in, Yan." The young man walked into the room and saw Wu Qingru sitting behind the desk. His expression was as calm as water, and his eyes were like the deep sea. "Eldest senior brother, the situation seems to be a bit unexpected." The young man, Huang Yuyan, deliberated over his words and said slowly, "Although Xi and Longxing didn't show up in person, and the old monsters of Mount Shu didn't come out of seclusion, 4 of the 5 great sword masters were defeated. Even the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation was broken. If not for the master of the celestial gate showing mercy, they would all have died there. Even so, Sword Venerate Guanchong's return to void Dharma body shattered, his cultivation regressed, and even the Shaoyang sword and Taiyin sword were taken." Huang Yuyan sighed softly. Although Shu Mountain lost more than one primordial spirit cultivator, including Sword Venerate Taiyin, in the war of vanquishing Buddhism, the Tempest Monastery was still destroyed. This time, they returned in a terrible defeat. Since the war between the two worlds 4,000 years ago, Shu Mountain has never suffered such a great loss. Wu Qingru smiled. It was indeed unexpected. The change this time was beyond my expectations. He looked at the pond in the distance outside the window of the study. Watching the ripples on the water, he said leisurely, "Speaking of which, this master of the celestial sect of wonders always surprises people. It's hard to see through him." He tapped his fingers on the table and said calmly, "Stop all activities against Shu Mountain. Put all the previous arrangements into hibernation." Wu Qingru looked at Huang Yuyan and said, "Especially the arrangements against the Zhou dynasty and Shu Mountain." "Oh right, I remember that the operation against the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, seemed to be unusual? Half a year ago, the original plan was to kill the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, at the southern foot of Kunlun Mountain. However, eldest senior brother instructed us to postpone the plan, so we didn't carry it out." Huang Yuyan nodded. "But the other party seems to have sensed some movements and realized something." Wu Qingru smiled. "Beyond Heaven Mountain's move might have been exposed. Looks like Liang Qian's subordinates have sharp eyes. Then let's just leave it hanging like this. It'll be more of a deterrent when it's about to be unleashed, and it can also serve as a cover for other arrangements." Huang Yuyan asked, "Does eldest senior brother mean to not lead the great Zhou dynasty into a conflict with the Shushan sword sect, and let Xianmen Tianzong face the Shushan sword sect alone?" Wu Qingru let out a rare sigh and shook his head. "My previous judgment was wrong. I thought that Xianmen Tianzong was under too much pressure, so I planned to suppress the Shushan sword sect first and force them to settle down for a while without affecting the overall situation. But now it seems that if we follow the original plan, Xianmen Tianzong, the Qin dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty will join forces to attack Shu. The Shushan sword sect will be under too much pressure." Wu Qingru tapped his fingers on the table and suddenly smiled. "Interesting. This is the second time I've changed my original plan, because of Xianmen Tianzong. It's stupid to change my mind all the time, but I have no choice but to do it now. The master of the Taoist sect is indeed not simple." He stood up and walked out of the study. "Yuyan, go and make the arrangements. I still have to meet the Qin emperor." Huang Yuyan nodded and sighed. "I thought that after the fall of the Tempest Temple, the reincarnation sect would be the most likely to fill the vacancy of the 3 holy lands. But based on the current situation, it seems that Xianmen Tianzong, which has been established for less than a year, is more powerful." Wu Qingru smiled faintly. "Maybe it is, but we don't know for sure. But in the history of the Tianyuan world, there have been many amazing figures who eventually withered and disappeared. Is Xianmen Tianzong an eternal star, or an instant meteor? It's still too early to make a conclusion." He put his hands behind his back and walked out of the study. Facing the faint light of dawn, he squinted and smiled. "Shushan has a good opponent now. The battle where Lin Feng broke the 6 meridians heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan shocked the world. If people had only seen Lin Feng as a rising star before, then this battle had completely established his position as a giant in the divine land. After countless powers recovered from their shock, they all began to analyze the process of this battle, and at the same time analyze the effects of this battle. The battle between the Shushan sword sect and Xianmen Tianzong has already reached the point where one side must die. Within the imperial city of the Great Zhou dynasty, within the imperial palace, Emperor of Zhou sat cross-legged on the dragon throne. Slowly, he said. Not to mention the fact that the reputation of the Shushan sword sect has been heavily damaged after this battle. Just the fact that Lin Feng took away the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords is enough for Shushan to not let the matter rest. Within the imperial palace, the Marquis of Xuanji Zhu Hongwu replied silently, "Your Majesty is wise. The people of Shushan are used to being arrogant, blindly attacking Xian Longxing and the few great elders while they were in closed-door training. This defeat is not undeserved." In front of Zhu Hongwu stood a green-clothed girl. It was precisely Yan Mingyue. She sighed lightly. It's a pity that Xian Longxing's illustrious name was destroyed in a single day, having his divine ability and Dharma body destroyed by the master of Xian Gate. He won't be able to take revenge in a short period of time and redeem his face. For this kind of matter, if he can't get back at them on the spot, as time drags on, even if Xian Longxing wins the battle against Lin Feng in the future, he will still lose a lot of face. Liang Pan looked toward Zhu Hongwu, smiling slightly. However, the strength of this master of Xian Gate is truly beyond imagination. It seems like he won't be obediently killed by just 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators surrounding him. Unless these 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators are all strong practitioners like Xian Longxing. This was his idea of teasing Zhu Hongwu in the past. In the entire Great Zhou dynasty, perhaps only Liang Pan could tease his trusted official like this. Zhu Hongwu's expression did not change. Your Majesty is right, but even someone as strong as Yudu of the Tianhai Yudu ended up dying in the past. No matter who it is, if they stand in the way of the general trend, they will definitely end up with their bodies crushed. The master of Xian Gate, Lin Feng, should first prove that he can defeat Xian Longxing. Even though the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Shushan is strong, it is not invincible. Furthermore, the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation in this battle is not his peak condition. Liang Pan and Yan Mingyue both smiled slightly. What Zhu Hongwu said just now was not wrong. The 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Shushan sword sect, in theory, was naturally the formation set up by 6 great sword cultivators of the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm. Its power was the greatest. That was also the most glorious moment in the history of Shushan sword sect. 6 strong practitioners of the primordial spirit realm had set up the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation and rampaged through the great heaven primordial world. Gods and Buddhas had to flee, establishing the position of Shushan sword sect as one of the 3 holy lands of the divine land. But as the world changed, some of the 6 great practitioners of the primordial spirit realm died, and some went missing. For tens of thousands of years after that, Shushan never had 6 great sword cultivators of the primordial spirit realm at the same time. The strongest 6 meridians heavenly sword formation thus became a lost song. After that, generally speaking, it was more common for 6 mighty practitioners of the 2nd tier of the primordial spirit realm to set up a sword formation. This meant that the 6 great sword masters of Shushan's 6 meridians sword formation would set up the formation. At the same time, they would be paired with the Shaoyang sword, Taiyin sword and other 6 meridians immortal swords. When 6 people and 6 swords worked together, they would obtain an extremely powerful killing power. They were invincible against those below the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and could even kill experts of the primordial spirit realm. They could even put up a fight against elite 3rd tier primordial spirit realm bulls like Yan Nanlai and Xian Longxing. They were truly ferocious beyond compare. But in this battle with Lin Feng, the Taiyin sword lord had already fallen, the Shaoyang sword lord had remained in Shushan, and the Shaoshang sword lord and the other 3 did not bring the Shaoshang, Shaozi, Guanchong and Lixiong swords. The power of the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation had been greatly reduced. It was only after Xian Longxing's immortal heaven sword Lord Dharma body had arrived that it showed some of its power. And now, even if Shushan made a comeback, Sword Venerable Moonshine had advanced to the 2nd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and Sword Venerable Guanchong had ascended to the primordial spirit realm. The 6 meridians heavenly sword formation would still be incomplete. This was because the Xiaoyang and Taiyin swords had already fallen into Lin Feng's hands. Shushan's recklessness this time had caused them to lose far more than what they seemed on the surface. Silently, Zhu Hongwu said, "But this way the Great Qin dynasty might change course." Emperor Liangpan of Zhou smiled. "That is to be expected. But there are some things that the Great Qin dynasty is already like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired." He turned to Yan Mingyue. "Fairy Yan, there are some things that I will leave to you." Yan Mingyue lightly tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. "It is already a matter of course. But seeing the outcome of this battle, Mingyue feels a little regretful." Liangpan laughed heartily. "Fairy Yan must be joking. The ones who should be regretting are the others. Just as we have said, there are many things that are like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired. There is no room for regret." The others were constantly planning and plotting. Even though he did not know what they were thinking, Lin Feng knew in his heart that after this battle, his position in the human cultivation world of the divine continent would be completely different. He did not even need to check his reputation in the system. Just by looking at Old Sword Immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and the others, he could see the obvious change in their attitudes. It was not that they had changed from arrogance to deference, nor were they friendly. On the contrary, the attitude of Old Sword Immortal and the others towards Lin Feng was clearly more reserved and courteous than before. It was not that they were estranged, but that they respected an expert. This was the same attitude they had towards Taishu Temple Master Yan Nanlai, Shushan Sect Master Xian Longsheng, Emperor Qin Shiyu, Emperor Zhou Liangpan, and other major figures. Lin Feng's expression did not change at all. He was still chatting happily with the others. But at this moment, he had naturally become the center of attention. The major factions all expressed their goodwill towards Lin Feng. Old Sword Immortal of the Heavenly Sword Sect even extended an invitation to Lin Feng, hoping that Lin Feng would come to Tongtian Mountain as a guest. Chapter 489. Inviting Lin Feng to his sect as a guest, the Old Sword Immortal was actually sighing in his heart. Among the great powers of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, the one who had the closest relationship with Xianmen Tianzong was the Purple Cloud Dao. That was during the Desolate Sea Assembly, when Lin Feng established a friendship with the big shot of the Purple Cloud Dao, Lord Blue Thunder. After Xianmen Tianzong dominated the Kunlun mountain range, the Purple Cloud Dao was the first to congratulate him. So the relationship between the two sides became closer. But in fact, long before Xianmen Tianzong opened his sect, the Heavenly Sword sect had already been in contact with Xianmen Tianzong. It was a pity that there was no further development, so the two sides gradually became estranged. At this moment, the Old Sword Immortal was trying his best to make up for his previous mistakes. Lin Feng did not mind this. It was not a bad thing to unite allies. Not only the Heavenly Sword sect, but the other sects also did not discriminate and accepted the goodwill expressed by the other party. In the end, everyone chatted happily and bid farewell to each other. Lin Feng smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, we will meet again." After saying this, he turned into a ray of light and broke through the void and left. After everyone watched him leave, the venue was silent for a moment. Everyone's thoughts were fluctuating, and countless thoughts flashed through their minds. The Flying Snow Sword Venerable and the Glorious Sun Sword Venerable looked at each other and sighed softly. They had the same thought in their minds. After being disturbed by the Shushan Sword sect, the alliance meeting was originally ruined, but the Xianmen sect master's action strengthened everyone's confidence in continuing to fight against Shushan. It's just that before the gathering, the source of this confidence was the Great Qin dynasty, but after the gathering, it became Xianmen Tianzong. This result was also within Lin Feng's expectations. However, he thought a level deeper. Haha, Is this another thank you gift from Emperor Qin Stonefeather to me? Or is it a test? But he probably did not expect the final outcome to be like this. After the people from Shushan arrived, the Great Qin dynasty could actually rush to support, but in the end, they chose to remain silent and let Lin Feng take action. However, Stonefeather did not expect that Lin Feng would be able to defeat the invading enemies of Mount Shu in an extremely short period of time. In the end, other than losing face for Shu Mountain, the prestige of the Great Qin dynasty was also damaged. After weighing the pros and cons, Stonefeather ultimately chose to remain silent. Although it would damage the prestige of the Great Qin dynasty, he would completely transfer the pressure of the Mount Shu sword sect to Xianmen Tianzong. He would retreat behind the scenes and free up his hands to clean up the aristocratic families within the country. The gains and losses are like drinking water, only one knows whether it is hot or cold. Stonefeather believed that Lin Feng would be able to clearly see the relationship between them. In this way, it would be equivalent to selling a favor to Xianmen Tianzong in a disguised form, and the two of them would form an additional layer of good karma. Lin Feng was in the void, traversing through space. As he walked, he pondered. A faint smile appeared on his lips. If you want to take something, you must first give it. Stonefeather understands this logic very well. His consciousness entered the system and checked his reputation. Then he discovered that his reputation points around the world had all broken through 80. Even if some places did not reach 80 currently, their potential had reached 80. As time passed, the influence of the battle with Mount Shu would continue to ferment. The potential reputation points of these places would eventually all be converted into true reputation points. For Lin Feng, the greatest gain from this battle was the soaring reputation points. He had single-handedly defeated a group of primordial spirit sword cultivators from Mount Shu, broken the 6 meridian heavenly sword formation, slain Xian Longxing's mystique Dharmakaya, and seized the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords. Any one of these could make Lin Feng's name resound throughout the divine continent. And now that all these things were gathered together, it immediately caused Lin Feng's personal reputation to soar. He had officially become a major figure on the same level as Yan Nanlai, Xian Longsheng, and the others. My personal reputation points are already a lot more than the previous requirement of 80, but... Lin Feng looked at the reputation points in the system and frowned slightly. But the overall reputation of the sect is still a little lacking. After this battle, Lin Feng's personal reputation points, no matter in the region, had already exceeded 80. In some places, it had even exceeded 90. He had already completely fulfilled the requirements of the system's mission. The overall reputation of Xianmen Tianzong had also reached 80 in most regions, but in some places it was a little lacking. The lowest region was only 70. After today's battle, Lin Feng's name had completely shaken the world. Naturally, the reputation of Xianmen Tianzong that he had founded had also risen along with it. But compared to his own personal reputation, it was still somewhat lacking. After all, personal reputation and the overall reputation of the sect could not be completely equated. In the history of the great heaven primordial world, there had been powerful loose cultivators who had written resplendent chapters that shone brilliantly. Even the 3 holy lands had to give way to them. But in the end, the orthodoxy that they had left behind had not been able to develop and grow, nor had they left behind any reputation. When people mentioned such sects, they would only say that they were the orthodoxy inheritances left behind by some powerful person. Lin Feng recalled the time when the overall reputation of the sect had greatly increased in the past. He had a rough idea in his heart. My personal reputation has a certain impact, but the disciples of the sect have made a name for themselves. The impact on the overall reputation of the sect is even more obvious. Thinking of this, Lin Feng smiled. It's about time for the few brats of my family to mature. For example, Shi Tianhao and the others, their own paths of destiny had already gradually opened. They had written their own legends, stepped onto their own stage, and emitted a brilliance that attracted the attention of the world. Lin Feng suddenly laughed a little unscrupulously. Mount Shu Sword Sect. Why do you think I spared you this time? I'm familiar with the self-cultivation of directors and scriptwriters. Of course, I remember that on the most dazzling and grandest stage, other than the main character, there must also be enough supporting characters. But this time, I still have to thank you for your warmth. Unlike the others who were only guessing, Lin Feng had a much clearer understanding of the gains and losses of this battle. Aside from the great reputation, Lin Feng also had many other gains. He flipped his palm and a sharp sword energy struggled inside a cloud of violet energy. This was a strand of sword energy that Lin Feng had captured after killing Xian Longxing's immortal heaven sword sovereign avatar. This sword energy was extremely ferocious. Even with Lin Feng's magic power, he couldn't restrain it. It was possible to kill it, but it was very difficult to restrain it for a long time without destroying it. However, Lin Feng didn't plan to keep it. After returning to Jade Capital Mountain, he directly sent it into the Black Heaven Time Light Grotto. There, the giant sword box was the true home of this sword energy. With this sword energy, the refinement of the ominous sword would be much faster. In fact, Lin Feng was well aware that Xian Longxing might have the same idea. He was trying to comprehend the ominous sword intent to improve Shu Mountain's sword Dao. Xian Longxing of Shushan was in seclusion, and did not come out. It looked like he could only lead the revered swordsman of Little Shang, and the others back in a sorry state. He even had his Dharmakaya destroyed. Although it was shameful, he had personally experienced the heaven-punishing sword Qi. It was more or less beneficial for him to study the sword will of the ominous sword. Unfortunately, he didn't actually obtain this peerless ominous sword. With Xian Longxing's sword Dao cultivation, just touching the heaven-punishing sword energy was like scratching an itch through his boots. It didn't help much and instead made him yearn for Lin Feng's ominous sword even more. Lin Feng was different. He didn't expect to learn Shu Mountain's heaven-punishing sword energy. He only wanted to use this supreme sword Dao to help him sharpen his sword. While advancing and retreating, he gained some benefits. It was just that outsiders wouldn't know of these gains. However, Lin Feng was increasingly looking forward to the day when this peerless ominous sword would truly appear. As he pondered, Lin Feng felt the Xiaoyang and Taiying swords he had also suppressed trembling, trying to break free. Lin Feng's consciousness swept over, and saw a figure appear beside the Xiaoyang and Taiying swords. They weren't illusory, but real bodies formed from sword intent and sword qi. They were the sword spirits of the Xiaoyang and Taiying swords. The Xiaoyang sword spirit was a dignified and steady middle-aged man. He wore a wide robe and had 3 strands of black beard. His expression was calm and dignified. The Taiying sword spirit was a woman. She had a beautiful face and a cold demeanor. Her temperament was unpredictable. The 2 sword spirits formed a sword seal together. Sword qi soared into the sky, resisting the yellow light above their heads. The yellow light was as heavy as the earth. It was the power of Lin Feng's heaven mandate seal that was suppressing them. Other than the yellow light, there were countless layers of space folded together, forming a sparkling crystal wall-like barrier that formed the second layer of seal. Above the crystal wall, the small world formed by the mass of purple gas was the 3rd layer of seal. As if realizing that Lin Feng was looking at them, the 2 sword spirits looked over and met Lin Feng's gaze. The Xiaoyang sword spirit said in a low voice, "Are you the master of the Celestial Gate? Holding me and Taiying here is too rash. You have bullied Shu Mountain too much." Lin Feng's calm and composed voice quietly echoed in the small world of heavens. Those who humiliate others will always be humiliated by others. You have met with this calamity today only because your Shushan has brought it upon yourselves. The Xiaoyang sword spirit was silent for a moment. He was a sword spirit, and his personality was of the same origin as the sword Dao of the Xiaoyang sword. He had always been calm and dignified. Even the sword master of Shu Mountain's Xiaoyang sword sect, Sword Venerable Xiaoyang, was the most composed and kind among the 6 sword masters. The Sword Venerable Xiaoyang didn't leave Shu Mountain this time because his sect master and grand elders were in seclusion, so the sect needed someone to manage the situation. On the other hand, he didn't like Shu Mountain's operation this time. Thus, he stayed at Shu Mountain and didn't participate. However, since it was the sect's decision, he didn't oppose it. The Xiaoyang sword sect also sent Sword Venerable Sky-Reaching Sword. The sword Venerable Xiaoshang and the others expected to use the 6th Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword formation to deal with Lin Feng. So the sword Venerable Xiaoyang tacitly allowed him to bring the Xiaoyang sword away. Unexpectedly, Lin Feng was too ferocious and defeated the 6th Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword formation. Xian Longsheng was in seclusion and sent the Immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's avatar, but it couldn't do anything to Lin Feng. Instead, the Xiaoyang sword and Taiyin sword were taken away. The Taiyin sword spirit's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, "Xiaoyang, what's the point of saying so much? It's just that the winner takes all and the loser takes all. But don't even think about making us wait helplessly for death." While speaking, her entire person merged into one with the moon sword, turning into clouds and mist, continuously moving about and attacking Lin Feng's mana seal. The Xiaoyang sword spirit sighed and disappeared as well. She fused with the Xiaoyang sword and turned into a golden light that soared into the sky, creating an attack even more powerful than the Taiyin sword. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled. Both of them are peak incarnation level magic treasures. They are indeed quite energetic. Chapter 490. The Xiaoyang sword's bright golden sword gleam was like a pillar that held up the sky, forcefully withstanding the suppression of Lin Feng's heaven-bearing seal. And the lunar sword turned into clouds of mist, twining around the golden sword aura, continuously stimulating the golden sword aura and assisting it wholeheartedly, causing the Xiaoyang sword aura to become stronger and stronger, attempting to break through Lin Feng's mana seal. Lin Feng looked at this scene with interest, and then increased the pressure on the heaven-bearing seal a bit more. At the same time, the power of the All Heavens capture was added, suppressing the Xiaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword. Feeling the increasing pressure, the two swords changed their way of fighting. The golden sword gleam suddenly disappeared, completely merging into the clouds, changing from the previous lesser yang as the main and lunar as the support mode to the lunar sword acting as the main force to deal with Lin Feng's mana, while the lesser yang sword is hidden in the mist formed by the lunar sword, continuously using its own sword energy spirit energy to support it. The two swords no longer fought head-on, instead using the Taiyin sword's ever-changing sword intent to deal with Lin Feng, hoping to use softness to overcome hardness. Yes, both swords are transformation-grade Dharma treasures, and they have reached the peak of transformation, only one step away from the Mahayana realm. Lin Feng had a plan. The remaining 4 6 Meridian Immortal Swords of Mount Shu should be of the same level. Just like how cultivators cultivated and improved their realm, Dharma treasures also had their own realms. Dharma treasures had 4 realms, from low to high, namely spirit-bearing, transformation, Mahayana, and creation. The first realm was called spirit-bearing, which meant nurturing a primordial spirit, giving birth to a Dharma treasure's primordial spirit. Its consciousness would constantly grow, from a simple, chaotic thought to a complete independent thought and self-awareness. Furthermore, the primordial spirit could absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, constantly increasing its magic power, just like a human cultivating. However, spirit-bearing grade Dharma treasures could not form their own spiritual body, their consciousness completely dependent on the body of the Dharma treasure. Cultivation required the master's help, which would allow the treasure's power to grow rapidly. Self-cultivation would be very slow. If the magic treasure were to advance to the second stage of the incarnation realm, then the situation would be different. The magic treasure's original spirit would condense its own form, and could temporarily leave the magic treasure's body. In this way, the magic treasure's original spirit could cultivate normally without the need of the master's sacrificial refining, and its strength could also increase rapidly. Generally speaking, the power of a magic treasure depended on the cultivation of the refiner. Spirit nurturing grade was equivalent to the refiner's first-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage strength, while transformation grade was equivalent to the second-tier primordial spirit reversion stage. Mahayana grade magic treasures were equivalent to the third-tier primordial spirit convergence stage. However, there was a problem, and that was that spirit nurturing grade and transformation grade treasures could not unleash their full power on their own. They had to be controlled by a primordial spirit powerhouse of the same level in order to unleash 100% of their power. In the battle before the opening ceremony of the Sand Continent City, Pang Jia had wielded the hexagonal sword of the Taishu Temple. Because Pang Jia had not attained the nascent divinity, the hexagonal sword had not been able to display its full power during the battle. Although it was far more powerful than ordinary Yuanying grade magic treasures, it was not the power that a magic treasure should have. If it had been in the hands of Yan Mingyue, who had attained the primordial spirit stage back then, the power of the hexagonal sword would have been equivalent to that of a first-tier primordial spirit stage powerhouse. By the same logic, during the Battle of Kunlun Mountain, the Yu family's patriarch, Lord Xianming Yu Xintao, had wielded the Xianming treasure book, the Yu family heirloom, to fight against Lin Feng. The Xianming treasure book was a transformation-grade magic treasure, but because Yu Xintao was only at the first-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage, and had yet to attain the void reversion stage, the power that the Xianming treasure book could unleash was only at the spirit nurturing grade. During the Desolate Sea Assembly, the Great Qin Dynasty's Prince Anliang, Shi Zongyue, had wielded the transformation-grade magic treasure, the Hidden Dragon Kettle, with his second-tier primordial spirit reversion stage cultivation. At the moment, the Xiaoyang and Taiyin swords that Lin Feng was wielding were both transformation-grade magic treasures. Moreover, they were both at the peak of the transformation grade. They were only a step away from reaching the next level. However, such a short distance was like the distance between heaven and earth. If no one wielded them, they would not be able to unleash their full power. Magic treasures needed to advance to the third-tier realm, the Mahayana grade. Only then would the primordial spirit be fully developed. It would then be able to separate from the body and control the body independently. It would be able to unleash its full power independently and do as it pleased. The combat power of a Mahayana-grade magic treasure was completely equivalent to that of a third-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage almighty expert. At this stage, the magic treasure's primordial spirit could even choose to transcend the tribulation and reincarnate as a real living being. It would be born and grow, becoming a truly independent, brand new life in the vast thousand domains. The primordial spirit transcended the tribulation and reincarnated, severing the connection between it and the original owner of the sacrificial vessel. However, the primordial spirit that transcended the tribulation and reincarnated would also completely sever the connection between it and the body of the magic treasure, forever losing the chance to become a creation treasure. After reincarnation, everything was unknown. Although it was much easier to cultivate the primordial spirit of a magic treasure compared to ordinary living beings, it was completely unknown whether it could become a primordial spirit and ascend to the realm of carefree immortality. Therefore, generally speaking, the primordial spirit of a magic treasure would not take the initiative to reincarnate. A magic treasure that had lost its origin spirit had a certain chance of giving birth to a new origin spirit. It wasn't a replication. The relationship between a new magic treasure's origin spirit and the original origin spirit was similar to that of a child and a parent. As for the fourth realm of magic treasures, which was also the highest realm, the creation realm, it was much more mysterious. In the entire history of the heaven primal world, only a few creation treasures had appeared. When a Dharma treasure advanced to the creation realm, its origin spirit would lose its previous form. Instead, it would gradually transform into an existence that resembled the will of the creation realm, and would not appear often. Regarding the treasure of creation, the Buddhist Great Lane Temple had proposed a concept in the past. It was known as the Nirvana Talisman, implying that the sea of bitterness was boundless. With the Nirvana Talisman, people could cross the sea of bitterness and reach the shore. Between life and death, there was great terror. Without becoming a primordial spirit, one's lifespan was limited. There would come a day when one would reach the end. When humans achieved the primordial soul realm, and demons cultivated the immortal demon soul, they could live as long as the heavens and earth. Naturally, their lifespans were almost infinite. As long as the heavens and earth were not destroyed, they would not die. But what if this part of the world, this part of the vast thousand worlds, was completely destroyed? For a primordial spirit powerhouse, other than being killed by external forces, the only natural way to die was to follow the world to the nirvana. The nirvana of heaven and earth was a greater terror than life and death. Those who lived as long as the heavens and earth would naturally reach the end of their lifespans as well. When the nest was overturned, there would be no eggs left intact. Birth, old age, sickness, death, success, failure, and emptiness. Creation was a cycle between birth and death. A place of creation would open up, develop, and eventually decline until it was destroyed, returning to nothingness. Then, it would be reborn from nothingness. And according to legend, the treasure of creation was a supreme treasure that had the hope of resisting the nirvana of heaven and earth. It helped people traverse countless eras and break through the nirvana of heaven and earth to walk towards a new life. However, the treasure of creation rarely appeared in the world. In the great heaven primordial world, it had gradually become a legendary existence. It was extremely difficult for an artifact to become a treasure of creation. In the history of the great heaven primordial world, the treasures of creation that were recorded in the history of the great heaven primordial world all required a certain amount of luck in order to cross the threshold that was like a natural chasm. This natural chasm was not only difficult to refine, but also almost insurmountable in terms of power. However, among the three grades of spirit conception, transformation, and Mahayana, there were existences that were inferior to the superior ones. Between different artifacts, there were also differences in strength. There were many factors that determined which was superior, such as the level of the refiner's cultivation, the quality of the Taoist techniques that the refiner cultivated, the quality of the materials and refinement conditions, and so on. Apart from these conditions, there was also the factor of luck. Some artifacts, although only at the spirit conception level, could be stronger than transformation level artifacts, and could even challenge Mahayana artifacts. This was similar to how some cultivators could fight above their level because of their powerful dharmic powers, or because of their extraordinary talent. For example, Lin Feng's enlightened artifact, the Bell of Creation, had now refined the first manifestation, known as the Life Creation Gate. At this moment it was a spirit conception level artifact, and had just developed a spiritual consciousness. However, it was still like a baby and needed to continue nurturing and growing. However, although it was only at the spirit conception level, Lin Feng already had a rough estimate of the power of the Life Creation Gate. It was far superior to ordinary spirit conception artifacts. And the two swords of Xiaoyang and Taiyin that Lin Feng was currently messing around with were also the cream of the crop among the magic treasures of the incarnation level. Furthermore, they had both reached the peak of the incarnation level, and were only one step away from the Mahayana realm. As swords, they were sharp and powerful. If they were controlled by a second or third tier essence soul realm expert, and unleashed their full power, they could even fight against a Mahayana artifact. However, due to the inherent weakness of transformation level artifacts, they could not unleash their full power. It was effortless for Lin Feng to suppress them. Facing the Xiaoyang and Taiyin swords that were trying to escape, Lin Feng smiled slightly. Surging dharmic powers rushed into the small world of heavens, and directly turned into two purple hands. One hand grabbed the cloud mist that the Taiyin sword had transformed into, while the other hand slapped. A golden light was shaken out of the cloud mist. It was the Xiaoyang sword. The Xiaoyang sword turned back into a giant sword that was 10 feet long and had no edge. Under the suppression of Lin Feng's dharmic powers, the Taiyin sword also turned back into its original form. The two swords were grabbed by Lin Feng. The huge power made them tremble continuously, but they could not escape. 10,000 years of hard work will be wasted in a day. I don't want that. You two should respect yourselves. Lin Feng said lightly. I don't covet the two of you to work for me, Xianmen Tianzong. However, if you want to cause trouble, I don't mind shattering your primordial spirits. The Taiyin sword was the first to calm down. A cold thought came from the blade. All right, I'll wait to see you perish under my Shushan sword. On the other hand, the Xiaoyang sword refused to give in even though its attitude was more peaceful at the beginning. It persisted in resisting. The Taiyin sword sent a message to him. If you perish here, the Xiaoyang sword lineage will be greatly weakened. My Shushan 6 Meridian's heavenly immortal sword formation will also collapse. Keep yourself alive. When he comes to Shushan to seek revenge from the Xianmen sect's master, we can cooperate with him from the inside. Chapter 491. Unlike the lunar sword, the Xiaoyang sword remained silent, but its confrontation with Lin Feng did not stop. Instead, it intensified. A person who was usually peaceful would appear especially stubborn in certain areas. In a sense, you are no different from a real human. Lin Feng laughed inwardly. A pity that stubbornness is useless against me. If you were a Mahayana-grade Dharma treasure, you might be able to cause a few waves. But an ownerless Dharma treasure better not jump around. Without even looking, Lin Feng opened his left hand and released another wave of spiritual power. It condensed into a huge purple hand that grabbed the Xiaoyang sword and gripped it tightly. The golden sword light that had been flickering on the sword was instantly extinguished. The Xiaoyang sword let out a piercing sound that made one's teeth ache, as if it was wailing. Lin Feng said indifferently, "I will not make things difficult for you. Just stay put." The Xiaoyang sword was completely restrained by Lin Feng's spiritual power and could not break free. Although the sword spirit still transmitted an unyielding will, it could only helplessly be suppressed by Lin Feng. On the other side, the lunar sword was also suppressed by Lin Feng. The two swords were sent into the Black Heavens Time Light Cave by Lin Feng, and they were suppressed under the huge sword case along with the remnant soul of the Golden Crow Great Sage. The huge sword case vibrated, and a terrifying aura spread out, causing the Xiaoyang sword and the lunar sword to tremble. They were both swords that had given birth to primordial spirits. They had a deeper understanding of the power of the peerless sword sealed within the sword case. They could clearly sense how terrifying it was. After putting away the two Dharma treasures, Lin Feng thought for a moment. Yes, I've made a mortal enemy of the Shushan sword sect this time. Almost all the Shushan second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators have been heavily injured by me. Without the Xiaoyang and lunar swords, the power of the 6 Meridian Heavenly Sword formation has been greatly reduced. The overall strength of the Shushan sword sect has been damaged, and they should be in a defensive state to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation. Logically speaking, the Mount Shu sword sect should not take the initiative to attack at this moment. But it is hard to guarantee that Mount Shu is used to being arrogant and will take the risk out of desperation. Lin Feng thought to himself, Little Lin and Little Qing are alone outside now. Perhaps they will become the targets of Mount Shu sword sect's revenge. In fact, purposely placing Wang Lin and Yang Qing outside, and making them the target of the enemy's attack, then Lin Feng would make preparations in advance and make arrangements. That would be the most advantageous choice. It was very likely that he would launch a beautiful ambush and lure out the hidden enemies and kill them. However, Lin Feng did not intend to do so. After thinking for a while, he decided to summon Wang Lin and Yang Qing back to the mountain. As for Wang Lin's parents, Lin Feng also prepared to give special permission to Wang Lin to bring them back to the mountain. The same situation also applied to the Xiao family in Wuzhou City. If Xiao Yan had people he could not let go of, he could also bring them back to the mountain. When the time came, it would be fine to settle them in their own cave abodes. Although the Great Qin dynasty had sent people to watch over them in the dark, under the situation where Mount Shu and Xianmen Tianzong were at odds, they most likely would not make such a strong enemy like the Great Qin dynasty. However, it was hard to guarantee that there would be people who only seek temporary pleasure. Lin Feng was not interested in taking the risk. Thinking to this point, Lin Feng touched the space between his eyebrows. Bright flames rushed out and landed in front of him, turning into the image of a giant. It was the Flame Dragon Heavenly Armor. Under the control of Lin Feng's will, the Flame Dragon Heavenly Armor separated. The War God clone flew out from within and reappeared in the world. The violent blood energy was like the scorching sun across the sky, making one's heart palpitate. The War God clone was created by the system. Its cultivation level was automatically raised to the same level as Lin Feng himself. The degree of closeness could be said to have surpassed that of the clone. It was like Lin Feng's second self. At this moment, the strength of the War God clone had already reached the peak of the first-tier primordial soul adept. Among the adepts of the same tier that Lin Feng had seen, perhaps only Zhu Honggu, who was at the first-tier primordial soul, was qualified to exchange blows with the War God clone. Like Prince Shuxian and Prince Yuxian of the northern militant faction, they were completely no match for the War God clone. Now, the war god clone could even fight against a second-tier primordial soul adept. As for the Iron Tree clone, it was still at the early yuanying stage. It still needed to continue cultivating. Now that Lin Feng had attained the primordial soul stage, it was no longer difficult for him to refine the Flame Dragon heavenly armor. Hence, there was no need for the War God clone to continue staying in the Flame Dragon heavenly armor. After the War God clone came out, Lin Feng's main body drew a line with his hand and tore open a crack in the void. The War God clone traversed the endless space and headed towards Wang Lin's hometown, the southern border of the Great Qin dynasty. Although martial adepts had strong battle strength, because they did not abandon their physical bodies, they were much slower than primordial soul incarnations in long-distance travel. Although they were faster in short-distance sprints and could also tear open space to escape, they were much slower than primordial soul incarnations. There were pros and cons. Lin Feng's main body used his dermic powers to send the War God clone on a journey, so that it could reach its destination as soon as possible. Lin Feng's main body tore open the void and flew. When he felt that he was about to reach his destination, he suddenly felt a severe distortion in the space. Lin Feng frowned and said, "This feeling, is it because the space barrier of the Divine Land is broken and connected to the void battlefield?" The void battlefield was a strange space that hung alone in the sky. It was vast and filled with turbulent space currents and void storms. It was extremely dangerous. Cultivators below the Golden Elixir period would definitely die if they entered. Even cultivators in the Golden Elixir period would have a slim chance of survival. Normally, only cultivators in the yuanying and primordial soul stages would enter, but it was also very dangerous. Just the number of primordial soul stage experts who had died in the void battlefield was unknown. Lin Feng tore open the space and arrived at Wang Lin's hometown. As soon as he arrived, he immediately saw a huge hole in the sky that was constantly twisting, as if it was a black hole that was going to devour everything. However, the boundless world of the Divine Land was constantly repairing and stabilizing itself. The hole in the space barrier was gradually mended and became smaller and smaller. It wouldn't take long before it disappeared. Lin Feng scanned with his divine sense and his face instantly turned ugly. This was because he realized that he couldn't feel the spiritual power aura of Wang Lin and Yang Qing. Not only their own spiritual power aura, but even the space talisman that Lin Feng left for them couldn't be felt. There were only two possibilities for such a situation to occur. One was that an expert with a higher cultivation than Lin Feng had used a great magical power to cut off the connection between Lin Feng and them. The other possibility was that Wang Lin and Yang Qing had entered the void battlefield. Lin Feng took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay calm. Previously, he thought that the Shi clan's life lantern was a very good idea, so he made some himself. Wang Lin and Yang Qing's life lantern were fine. At this moment, their lives shouldn't be in danger. Looking up at the space crack in the sky, Lin Feng didn't hesitate to fly up. The closer he got to the space crack, Lin Feng suddenly felt that the spiritual power imprint that he left on Yang Qing's body was becoming clearer. Lin Feng carefully searched with his divine sense, and immediately found a green light at the edge of the space crack. It was already on the other side of the void. After the space crack closed, it would most likely be left in the void battlefield. It was a Fei Lian light shadow. However, at this moment, it was struggling to resist the huge force of the space distortion. It looked like it was on the verge of breaking. Inside the green Fei Lian light shadow, there was a figure. It was Lin Feng's fifth disciple Yang Qing. At this moment, he was gritting his teeth and pouring all his spiritual power into a jade talisman in his hand. He was trying to drive the Fei Lian light shadow to break out of the restraint of the space distortion and return to the Divine Land. Unfortunately, Yang Qing hadn't formed the Golden Elixir yet. He couldn't use the full power of this yuanying stage magic item. He could only barely hold on. Seeing that the space crack was getting smaller and smaller, and was about to close, Yang Qing's eyes were filled with despair. He looked down at the jade talisman in his hand and said, "No, I can't give up. Even if I can't go back myself, I have to send them back." Right at that moment, a silhouette suddenly appeared in front of the Fei Lian's silhouette. The silhouette's strength was immense, and it reached out to grab the Fei Lian's silhouette. Although the silhouette's hand was not large, it was powerful enough to instantly drag the Fei Lian's silhouette back from the other side of the rift. Master. Yang Qing saw the person who came, and was instantly surprised. Lin Feng brought Yang Qing back to the boundless world of the divine land. After landing on the ground, Lin Feng asked in a deep voice, "Little Qing, what happened?" Yang Qing calmed down and quickly replied, "It was a late yuanying old monster looking for trouble. Third senior brother brought me to fight with him. In the process of fighting, we accidentally opened up a void passage." Someone from the Mount Shu sword sect? No. Yang Qing shook his head. Yang Qing shook her head and said, "It seemed to be a demonic cultivator. 10 days ago, a demonic cultivator from the Golden Elixir period suddenly appeared nearby. He collected tens of thousands of souls to cultivate his demonic arts, and targeted third senior brother's hometown. So third senior brother killed him." Lin Feng nodded slightly. What happened in front of him was completely accidental. In other words, it was Wang Lin's destined son of heaven's aura that automatically attracted him. He cried and shouted and stuck to him, begging for abuse and education. In the end, behind that Golden Elixir period demonic cultivator, stood a late yuanying old monster, who came to seek revenge. This person was extremely vicious and actually wanted to slaughter third senior brother's entire family. He even wanted to refine all of them into Yin souls and not let them reincarnate. Hearing Yang Qing say this, Lin Feng's heart thumped. Fuck! God's cursed star? Although he teased Wang Lin for having a face like a god's cursed star, it was definitely a tragic thing for his relatives to suffer misfortune, especially his parents. Lin Feng did not want Wang Lin to experience the endless sorrow of his flesh and blood being separated, and the death of his loved ones. Even if it affected Wang Lin's growth, and made his path to becoming the destined son of heaven return to mediocrity, Lin Feng did not want him to really walk the path of a god's cursed star. He believed that Wang Lin himself would definitely want his parents to be safe forever. Little Lin's family. Lin Feng's eyes stared at Yang Qing. Yang Qing took out a jade slip and said, "That old monster came too fiercely. Some of third senior brother's clansmen were killed. Third senior brother, and I only had time to save his parents and some others. Phew, a great fortune in misfortune." Lin Feng let out a long breath, and then looked at Yang Qing with dissatisfaction. "Brat, don't take such a big breath." Yang Qing's face was full of worry, but in order to protect his parents, third senior brother fell into the depths of the void crack with that old monster. Chapter 492. Even though Wang Lin had already formed the Golden Elixir, and with the help of the Underworld Pearl and the Cloud Elephant Seal, he could still fight against the yuanying stage old monsters. However, the power of the heavenly law's embodiment of Earth in the later stages of the yuanying stage was not something that could be compared to, if not for the fact that they had accidentally broken through the world barrier, and everyone had been dragged into the void battlefield. Wang Lin and Yang Qing would not have been able to get away with it. If Yang Qing could also form the Golden Elixir, they might be able to protect themselves in a 2 versus 1 battle. Of course, if they did not break through the world barrier and were trapped in the void battlefield, Wang Lin and Yang Qing could immediately contact Lin Feng. Not to mention the god of war doppelganger, even the Taishu doppelganger could easily kill them. At this moment, Wang Lin was trapped in the depths of the crack in the void. In other words, he was already deep in the void battlefield. When it came to the dangerous places of the heaven primordial world, the void battlefield was ranked at the top. Even if a primordial spirit realm expert entered it, it would be difficult to guarantee their safety. However, the void battlefield contained many rare cultivation resources of the heaven primordial world. Among them, there was no lack of precious natural treasures. Therefore, even though there was great danger, it attracted countless experts to search for treasures. Shi Tianhao's grandfather had disappeared in the void battlefield. His parents went to search for him and left him at Shi Tianyi's house, which led to Shi Tianhao's disaster. It was even to the extent that up until now, his grandfather and parents were still lost in the void battlefield without any news from them. Fortunately, the Shi clan had left behind their life lamps, and the flames of their life lamps had never been extinguished, so it meant that they were at least safe and sound. The biggest problem of the void battlefield was that it was easy to enter but difficult to leave. Even a primordial spirit realm expert could easily get lost in the void battlefield. To come out, other than mastering the mysteries of space, one also needed a bit of luck. This was because the void turbulence was completely chaotic and disorderly. Even if it was the current Lin Feng, or the head of the Mount Shu Sword Sect, Xian Longsheng, or the head of the Taishu Temple, Yen Nanlai, they could guarantee their own safety after entering the void battlefield. But if they wanted to find someone they were separated from and bring them out, the difficulty was almost limitless. Lin Feng took the jade scroll from Yangqing and scanned it with his consciousness. He found that there was a small space created with spiritual power that could accommodate many people. Among them, there was a middle-aged couple leaning against each other, and they were particularly eye-catching. Their facial features were at least 70% similar to Wang Lin's, and at this moment, their faces were filled with terror. This was because they had personally witnessed Wang Lin slaughtering thousands of people in an instant, and then refining their souls and imprisoning them. Their eyes were filled with worry. They were worried about their son Wang Lin and Lin. Although they had heard that their son's cultivation, they heard that Lin had a cultivation, and was almost an immortal Dao Lin Feng immortal. Wang had not revealed himself. Other than Wang Lin's parents, the others had a lot more complicated feelings. Some were afraid, some were angry, and there were all kinds of emotions. It's all your Wang Lin's fault for causing such a disaster. Some couldn't hold back and shouted at Wang Lin's parents. That old immortal said that it was because Wang Lin killed his grandson that he wanted to exterminate our entire clan to avenge him. A middle-aged man beside Wang Lin's parents felt it was unfair and snorted. You say it so easily. If not for Wang Lin and his junior brother, the demon who came at the beginning would have killed all of us. Did you forget how sixth uncle's family died? It wasn't your family that died, so how can you say such sarcastic words here? The person at the beginning choked and felt a little embarrassed. He shouted in exasperation. I am also sad that sixth uncle's family was killed, but what could we do? Wang Lin could have just caught that person and taught him a lesson before letting him go. But he wanted to be happy and killed that person, and now he has caused an even bigger disaster. The middle-aged man didn't give in. Wang Lin was avenging sixth uncle and the others. If I had to say, he was killed well. If we let that person go, how can we comfort sixth uncle's soul in heaven? If we let him go, that person will definitely come for revenge. At that time, more people will be killed. Maybe you will be the one who died. How can you still shout so happily now? Both sides had their supporters, and the people in the jade slips argued endlessly. When Wang Lin's parents heard people slandering their son, they were angry, but they were more worried about Wang Lin's safety. Lin Feng looked at the couple, looked at those people who stood up for Wang Lin and Yangqing, and sighed in his heart. I wonder what their original fate would be. Wang Lin's personality was emotional, but he was also silent and introverted. The words "Heavenly Curse Lone Star" were practically engraved on his face. Lin Feng couldn't help but guess that Wang Lin's path to becoming the son of heaven would probably be a path that was extremely emotional, but always unobtainable. Loss and gain were the main themes in his life. What he gained was what he wanted, but what he lost would probably hurt him even more. Taking back what he had lost was perhaps the strongest motivation for Wang Lin to move forward. In order to achieve this goal, he pushed himself to overcome all obstacles, and finally set foot on the peak. Did I change Wang Lin's fate? Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. If I didn't appear, what would Wang Lin's fate be now? The innate weakness of his innate talent caused Wang Lin to be destined to be ordinary at the beginning of his path of cultivation. The exquisite Tao techniques of the heavenly virtue scripture, the heaven spirit replenishing pill, the divine stone spirit platform, the mysterious heavenly treasure leaf, the heaven mending vine, the heaven connecting pill, and the mysterious heavenly time light grotto heaven to accelerate time, all of these work together. And Wang Lin's own hard work, allowing him to form the golden elixir within 100 years. Less than 3 years had passed in the outside world, and Wang Lin had returned with a golden elixir period cultivation. However, it was unknown how much hard work, resources, and time Lin Feng and his disciple had put in. If Wang Lin's original path of life was to join a small or medium-sized sect like the Hengyu sect and slowly polish himself, what kind of scene would he be 3 years later? Perhaps there was no need for that late-stage Yuanying old monster to make a move. That golden elixir period demonic cultivator, who came previously, would have slaughtered his clan. Or perhaps Wang Lin had offended someone outside, and they could not find him in a short time, so they came to vent their anger on his parents and clan. Then, Wang Lin's little universe would explode after receiving the news, and he would officially embark on the path of destiny. He would cultivate hard, and after achieving great success, he would find his enemy to take revenge. This was probably the original direction of the script. But now, everything had changed. Even if that late-stage Yuanying old monster personally took action, Wang Lin still managed to protect his parents' clan. From an emotional point of view, this was naturally something that Lin Feng was happy to see. However, with such a huge reversal of fate, could Wang Lin still be the original Wang Lin? Could his path of being the son of heaven still continue? This time, Wang Lin's parents had escaped a calamity. In the future, would Wang Lin's fate of being the inborn lone star come into effect again? Everything had become unknown. Just like how Wang Lin had used all his strength to protect his parents, he himself had disappeared and was lost in the void battlefield. For a core formation cultivator, that place was a perilous place with only a slim chance of survival. Not to mention that there was a late nascent soul cultivator who wanted to kill him. Although the spatial turbulence was chaotic and unpredictable, most people who entered together wouldn't be too far away from each other in the beginning. Frankly speaking, Wang Lin's parents were not dead. Lin Feng was happy for Wang Lin. However, as for Wang Lin's own safety, Lin Feng was a little worried. Originally, Lin Feng was not very worried about the safety of Son of Heaven like Wang Lin and Xiao Yan. These people were people who were not afraid of getting into trouble. Son of Heaven, the template of a protagonist. If this path of life was smooth and there were fewer trials and tribulations, they would not even be able to greet others when they went out. Turning danger into safety was common. Misfortune and fortune depended on each other. The truth was that it was scary but not dangerous. A dead protagonist was not a protagonist but a cameo, except at the end of the play. However, now that there was a slight deviation in Wang Lin's path of destiny, Lin Feng was not so confident anymore. Thinking of this, Lin Feng sighed. Forget it, I'll just make a trip. At the same time, I can also visit Tianhao's grandfather and parents. He returned the jade scroll to Yang Qing and said indifferently, "In the jade scroll, bring those who speak up for your third senior brother and his parents back to the mountain, and settle them in Fanlin-ju. As for those who don't know what's good for them, just leave them in Sand Continent City. When your third senior brother comes back, let him deal with them himself." As he said this, Lin Feng broke the void and sent Yang Qing in. The main body on Jade Jing Mountain cast a spell to guide Yang Qing back to the mountain. At this moment, the space in the distance split open, and 2 Yuanying cultivators walked out. When they saw Lin Feng, they were shocked. "Is this the master of Xianmen?" Lin Feng glanced at him. "Are you a cultivator from the Great Qin dynasty?" One of the Yuanying cultivators nodded. "I received news that there was a late-stage Yuanying demonic cultivator who sacrificed living souls to create chaos and fought with your sect's disciple here. The cultivators from the Great Qin dynasty who stayed here were also killed by this evil person. We specially rushed over to deal with it." Lin Feng nodded and looked at the crack in the barrier that was getting smaller and smaller. "My disciple Wang Lin fought with him and accidentally opened a passage to the void battlefield. The 2 of them went in together. You just have to reply truthfully about this matter. I also feel sorry that the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty were killed." The 2 Yuanying cultivators hurriedly said that they didn't dare. This is the territory of the Great Qin dynasty. The demonic cultivator used evil methods to refine living souls, and killed the people of the Great Qin dynasty. We cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty are responsible for this. Lin Feng's body flew up, flying towards the space barrier that was about to close up. "I'll leave the aftermath of this to you guys." After investigating the background of that demonic cultivator, if there are any accomplices, inform my Xiangate Sky Sect. Although his voice was calm, the hearts of the two Yuanying cultivators turned cold at the same time. They knew that Lin Feng was angry. If that old monster was a lone cultivator, it would be fine. If there was another force behind him, he would probably be in big trouble. Now the well-informed people in the Divine Land already knew that when the master of Xianmen was angry, even a colossus like the Shu Mountain Sword Sect would have to think twice and not dare to be as unbridled as before. After Lin Feng's God of War clone flew into the sky, he entered the spatial crack without hesitation and entered the void battlefield along with the void turbulence. Chapter 493. Yang Qing was sent back to Yujing Mountain, where Lin Feng's main body was waiting for him. Master, third senior brother he. Yang Qing appeared to be deeply worried. Lin Feng quietly said, entering deep into the void battlefield. This is your third senior brother's tribulation, but at the same time it is also an opportunity for him. Yang Qing sucked in a breath of cold air. He had heard of the dangers of the void battlefield. It was infamous in the entire heaven primal world. Lin Feng said, just in case, I've also sent one of my clones into the void battlefield. Hearing this, Yang Qing repeatedly nodded her head. Lin Feng continued saying, now tell me what happened in detail. Yes, master. Yang Qing told the story from 10 days ago, when he and Wang Lin discovered that there were demonic cultivators causing trouble, until today, when they suddenly came to kill them. Wang Lin risked his life to save his parents' clan, but the world barrier unexpectedly broke. Everyone, including the Yuanying old monster, was sucked into the void turbulence. Yang Qing was not sucked into the void crack, but in order to save people he had to bite the bullet and rush in. Wang Lin was entangled with the old monster, and in order to save Wang Lin's parents and clan, Yang Qing lost the chance to help Wang Lin. He could not even protect himself, and could only rely on the Yuanying magic tool to barely hold on. If not for Lin Feng's timely arrival, Yang Qing would have been in danger. I really could not help third senior brother at that time. I am sorry, master. Yang Qing lowered his head in disappointment. Lin Feng looked at him and shook his head slightly. No, you have done well enough. If little Lin was here now, he would also thank you for the choice you made at that time. Yang Qing felt a little better after receiving Lin Feng's praise and comfort, but he still felt it was difficult to let go. If my cultivation was stronger, maybe I could help third senior brother more. Lin Feng glanced at Yang Qing and nodded. Not bad, you have successfully broken through the bottleneck and condensed the pill cauldron. Back then, when he instructed Yang Qing to look for Wang Lin, he hoped that Yang Qing would cultivate together with Wang Lin and experience the tranquil state of mind, relieving the excessive psychological pressure. With a relaxed state of mind, Yang Qing's cultivation naturally flowed smoothly. She easily broke through her previous bottleneck, condensed her pill cauldron, and advanced to the late stage of foundation establishment. Under the inspection of Lin Feng's divine sense, he saw that there was a purple pill cauldron on top of Yang Qing's beer. This was the result of him cultivating the 8 trigrams Great Way scripture. And above the purple pill cauldron, there was an eye-catching phenomenon. The 2 colors, one green and one gold, formed a pattern that resembled a Taiji diagram and revolved continuously. The source of the green spiritual power was the lunar true water, while the source of the golden spiritual power was the solar true fire. Extreme yin and extreme yang, the 2 extremes of yin and yang, perfectly intertwined yet clearly separated, achieving an absolute balance. This was the reason why Yang Qing's constitution was as high as 9 points. This person had a 1 in a million constitution with a perfect balance of yin and yang, which coincided with the innate principle of the Great Way. Yin and yang complemented each other, and it was natural. Song Qingyuan and Dao Yuding of the Celestial Pool sect had an excess of true yin in his primordial yang, while the other had an excess of true yang in her primordial yin. However, they had not achieved a perfect balance of yin and yang, and there was a slight deviation. Nevertheless, their talents were already extremely outstanding, and they were treated as treasures by the Celestial Pool sect. The reason why Chao Wei and the Celestial Pool sect intended to pair the two of them as cultivation partners was that they hoped that after the two of them got married, they would achieve a perfect balance of yin and yang. However, Yangqing had a perfect balance of yin and yang, and it was innate, so he was superior. With such a constitution, no matter what kind of Dao technique he cultivated, he would get twice the result with half the effort. If the Celestial Pool sect's Arctic Flaming Sun Mystic Art was a Dao technique that was a balance of yin and yang, and it was a fusion of two opposing extremes, he would have a unique advantage. It was not an exaggeration to say that Yangqing's constitution was the most perfect for cultivating a Dao technique, like the Arctic Flaming Sun Mystic Art. If he were to become a disciple of the Celestial Pool sect, the status of Songqing Yuan and Dao Yuding would immediately be lowered, and they could only watch as he became the most favored and valued seedling of the Celestial Pool sect. After all, in the entire history of the Celestial Pool sect, there were only a few disciples with such talents. Those who succeeded were all people who left their names in the history books, and they were people who led the Celestial Pool sect by leaps and bounds. After Lin Feng realized this, he considered the problem of teaching in accordance with Yangqing's aptitude. Yangqing had the lunar true water, and he built his foundation with the lunar true solution, and even built his beer. Although he later changed to the 8 trigrams Universal Great Way scripture, he still had a good understanding of the lunar true solution. After Lin Feng deduced the Great Sun Brilliant Heaven scripture, he passed this Dao technique to Yangqing. He then guided Yangqing to use the 8 trigrams Universal Great Way scripture as his foundation. And on this foundation, he comprehended the Great Sun Brilliant Heaven scripture and the lunar true solution at the same time. Lin Feng gave Yangqing the vermilion flame ice flower, which he obtained from the Desolate Sea Assembly. At the same time, he also gave him some petals of the bipolar heavenly flower. This was all to help Yangqing comprehend the principle of the fusion of ice and fire, yin and yang. These two fundamentally opposing Dao techniques were originally at odds with each other. However, with the 8 trigrams Universal Great Way scripture as his foundation, and Yangqing's physique that was completely balanced with yin and yang, he finally achieved results after a period of cultivation. Other than his original lunar true water, Yangqing also cultivated the supernatural power of the solar true fire, and he figured out the concept of the two opposites but also the fusion of yin and yang. Finally, he fused water and fire, and walked his own path, forming an elixir cauldron. Previously, when the disciples tried to figure out their own Dao technique, Yangqing obtained it. It was called the Yin-Yang Dao Codex. It was the summary and induction of this concept. At that time, it had already taken shape. Now that Yangqing had successfully formed an elixir cauldron, he had perfected this Dao technique one step further. Seeing that Lin Feng was testing his cultivation, Yangqing hurriedly said, "Disciple will definitely continue to cultivate hard and strive to form his gold core as soon as possible." Hearing Yangqing say this, Lin Feng smiled and nodded his head. "That's right, little Qing, you need this kind of drive. Remember Master's words, you're very strong, much stronger than you imagine." Disciples' achievements today are all thanks to Master's teachings. Yangqing bowed solemnly. Lin Feng said, "All right, you can go now. Help your third senior Marshall Brothers family settle down. If there's anything, you can look for the Outer Sanctum steward, Dao Jiqiang, to help you. Little Lin will definitely come back." Lin Feng said lightly, "His parents and relatives are here. Master and you are here. Even if he goes to hell, little Lin will break through all the obstacles and return to the world. Master believes that he has the ability to do this." Yangqing nodded hard. Yes, third senior Marshall Brothers' character is indomitable, and his will is extremely strong. Disciple also believes that nothing can stump him. Lin Feng looked at Yangqing's back as he left. After a long time he sighed. Lin Feng firmly believed that Wang Lin would be able to return from the void battlefield. This was Lin Feng's hope for him. However, placing everything on an ethereal hope was not Lin Feng's style. Therefore, he had decided to send the God of War clone into the void battlefield. However, the space turbulence in the void battlefield was indeed difficult to deal with. Lin Feng cultivated the Tao Te Ching, and had already come into contact with the power of space when he was only at the foundation establishment level. Regarding the mysteries of space, Lin Feng's comprehension far surpassed cultivators of the same level. This made him much more at ease in the void battlefield compared to other people. But to find Wang Lin, who was lost in the depths of the battlefield to who knows where, it was still beset with difficulties. Shi Tianhao's parents went deep into the void battlefield to search for his missing grandfather. They used a secret technique to sacrifice their cultivation and relied on the bloodline connection to search for him. They had more hope than others. However, there was still no news of him after such a long time. I have to find him no matter how difficult it is. I can't just sit and wait. Lin Feng shook his head. He came down from the arcane treasure tree and saw a group of disciples still standing at the entrance of the disciples' abode. Not only the second-generation disciples, there were also Shi Tianhao, Zhu Yi, and their personal disciples Su Yunsheng, and the others. Xiaoyan was not here. Lin Feng asked the recovered Buddhist monk Dade to bring Xiaoyan to Wuzhou City. Before this, he, Zhu Yi, and the others also witnessed the live broadcast that Lin Feng sent back on Jade Capital Mountain. The group of people watched with great satisfaction. Previously in the cloudy forest realm, Lin Feng had cut off the signal for some things, and everyone had been watching intermittently. But this time, it was a live broadcast of the entire process. Seeing how Lin Feng handled the heavy like it was light, and how his mystical abilities and dermic powers had utterly defeated the big shots of the Mount Shu sword sect, even breaking the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation, everyone watched in a daze. When Lin Feng killed Xian Longxing's immortal heaven sword monarch avatar, and captured the Xiaoyang and Taiying swords, the second-generation disciples cheered in unison. In the Divine Land, standing at the peak of the human cultivation world, the Shu Mountain Sword Sect, the #1 sword holy land in the world, was beaten by their own patriarch until they could only flee. Seeing this scene, the Xianmen Tianzong disciples felt that their future was unprecedentedly bright. This battle not only increased Lin Feng's reputation worldwide, but it also further inspired the hearts of the people in his own sect, strengthening their unity and sense of honor. Even after the battle ended, they were unwilling to disperse for a long time. They gathered together and chatted excitedly, until Yang Qing returned to the mountain and wanted to go to Mortal Forest residence. Out of courtesy, they found Wang Lin's disciple, Li Xingfei, to lead the way. Everyone greeted Yang Qing together, and then they gradually calmed down. After Yang Qing briefly explained the situation, Zhu Yi and the others looked at each other with worried expressions, especially Shi Tianhao. Thinking about how his family was also lost in the void battlefield, he became even more worried. After arranging for the disciples to disperse, Zhu Yi's group came to greet Lin Feng. After knowing that Lin Feng had sent his god of war avatar into the void battlefield, Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others sighed in relief. Lin Feng looked at the tiny Shi Tianhao and slowly said, "This time, we entered the void battlefield to find little Lin, but also to find your parents and grandfather." Shi Tianhao's expression was no longer playful. He solemnly bowed towards Lin Feng. "Disciple thanks Master." The few of them were not as excited as the second-generation disciples. Witnessing Lin Feng's invincible prowess, they were happy but also felt pressured. The current Xianmen Tianzong was mainly supported by Lin Feng alone. When dealing with primordial spirit-level experts, most of the matters had to be handled by Lin Feng. Zhu Yi's and the others' current cultivation was not enough to stand out and hold up the facade. Shushan sect leader Xian Longxing is qualified for Master to take action. If the few of us can become stronger, we won't have to trouble Master to face those Shushan elders. Shi Tianhao, Zhu Yi, and Yu Hongyan looked at each other and saw the same expression in each other's eyes. We need to work harder and improve our cultivation to share Master's burden. Lin Feng saw all of this and naturally knew what they were thinking. He also felt happy in his heart. At this moment, one of his voice transmission crystals suddenly shattered. Lin Feng swept it with his mana, and found that the source was the girl who went to the Great Zhou dynasty to look for Luo Qinggu, Jun Zining. Chapter 494. After Lin Feng received Jun Zining's voice transmission, he used his own mana to communicate. Jun Zining's voice came from the other side. "Senior, Junior Jun Zining has disturbed you. It's okay. Lin Feng replied. If there's anything, just speak your mind. Jun Zining lowered her voice slightly. Senior, I found Xiao Wu. We are now temporarily staying at the Great Zhou Dynasty's Crown Prince's house, she said with some embarrassment. Xiao Wu, she's sick and is now recuperating. After she recovers, I want to take her back to the mountain to seek medical treatment. I hope Senior will take pity on her. Lin Feng smiled slightly. Jun Zining's words were obviously insincere. She was trying to cover for her little sister. Luo Qinggu, that little loli, was stubborn. It seemed that she had not come around yet. This autumn, my disciple Zhu Yi will go to the Great Zhou Dynasty's Tianjing city for the examination. Lin Feng said lightly. When the time comes, you can find him. Jun Zining quickly said. Thank you, Senior. I will obey. She hesitated for a moment and smiled awkwardly. Senior, during this period, if my family goes to look for me, please don't tell them. If they know where I am, they will definitely find Xiao Wu. Maybe they will send Xiao Wu back to the Luo family. Xiao Wu, she doesn't want to go back yet. There's a sentence that she didn't say out loud, but Lin Feng naturally understood the meaning behind her words. This little girl didn't want to go home either. However, Jun Zining was obviously thinking too much. Although Dao Master Lan Ting of Purple Cloud Path recognized her at the Kuanpeng Hidden Treasure, he only had a general understanding of the situation. After knowing that it was not the Jun family who actively contacted Xianmen Tianzong, he no longer paid attention to it. Although the Jun family in the ancient Yuantian world was anxious, they had not been able to find Jun Zining. They knew that Jun Zining and Luo Qinggu were best friends, so they contacted the Luo family. However, Luo Qinggu and her sixth grandfather Luo Qi kept their promise to keep Jun Zining's secret. He only revealed that Jun Zining was safe and sound, but kept his mouth shut about her exact whereabouts. Lin Feng said flatly, I've said that it's fine for you to stay on the mountain, but I won't stop you if someone from your family or someone from the Purple Cloud Taoism comes to pick you up. Jun Zining smiled sheepishly and said, Sorry for the trouble. Ending the call with Jun Zining, Lin Feng shook his head and laughed, putting the matter aside for the time being. He looked at Zhu Yi and smiled. Little Yi, you've passed the top scorer's examination this spring. This autumn, you'll have to go to Tianjing City to take the examination. Zhu Yi nodded. Just as Master said. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, Second senior brother, I've heard that it's an honor for scholars to pass the imperial examinations. Passing the top 3 grades is even more of an honor. Are you confident this time? Zhu Yi smiled. I'm confident that I can pass the top 3 grades, but it's hard to say whether I can win the imperial examinations and the imperial examinations consecutively. It depends on the examiner's standards and Emperor Liangpan's intentions. However, I understand the logic in my heart. I'm sure I'll write a good essay. Speaking of this, he looked at Lin Feng and said seriously, Master, I'm preparing to go into seclusion for a period of time. I'll try to pass the trials of the Yin Wind before the fall quarter examinations, and advance to the late stage of the Golden Elixir. Lin Feng looked calm. Have you thought about it? Among the disciples, Zhu Yi's cultivation was steady and orderly. It seemed like he did not show off his talents, but he was actually the most stable and well-prepared. Although he had just passed the trials of the Yin Fire at the Desolate Sea Assembly last year, and advanced to the middle stage of the Golden Elixir, Zhu Yi had been cultivating silently during this period of time. His understanding of Dao techniques and supernatural powers had become more refined. He created the 8 trigrams Divine Evolution Golden Scripture, and further understood the subtleties of Xianmen Tianzong's Dao techniques. After Lin Feng obtained the complete Dark Solitary Skeleton, he had comprehended the essence of the dark force within it and passed it on to Zhu Yi. Coupled with the true meaning of light from the Infinite Light Buddha scripture, Zhu Yi's Dao techniques continued to improve. In addition, with the vast amount of essence qi from the cloud forest tree as a material foundation, Zhu Yi's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. Previously, Lin Feng had communicated with him about his cultivation. Zhu Yi already had the ability to pass the trials of the Yin Wind, but Zhu Yi was hesitant about whether he should pass the trials of the Yin Wind and advance to the late stage of the Golden Elixir. He had hoped that after the fall quarter examinations this year, his spiritual will would be refined again, and then he would pass the trials of the Yin Wind. But now, Zhui had changed his mind. Looking at Lin Feng, Zhui answered, "I've thought about it. I'm not acting rashly, but I've made all the necessary preparations. There's no need to think too much. I'll just go with the flow and go with the flow, which is more suitable for cultivation." Shi Tianhao opened his mouth, but he felt a toothache when he recalled the 9 holes in his golden elixir. His golden elixir was in the 9th orifice of the Xiantian realm, so it would naturally expel the impurities in the golden elixir. So it was easy for him to pass the trials of Yin Wind, but it would be a little awkward for him. Lin Feng smiled. "Silly brat, you've already accumulated enough. As for the problem of your golden elixir, there's a high chance that you'll be able to resolve it. When you're ready, you can make your breakthrough to the late stage of the golden elixir. I still have to thank the cloud forest tree for that." Shi Tianhao smiled. Pursing his lips, Yu Hongyan's crimson eyes flickered with flames. "Master, I would like to challenge the core formation stage." Her cultivation had been progressing rapidly, but she didn't make her breakthrough to the golden elixir period, in order to ensure her foundation was solid. If she was too impatient, there might be a deviation in her cultivation. If she couldn't form her violet core after forming the golden elixir, then it would severely restrict her cultivation in the future. But after a long period of cultivation, Yu Hongyan's foundation had become more solid, and she was confident about it. "The time is ripe, so go ahead and do it. I will be staying on the mountain to protect the two of you." Lin Feng nodded his head with a smile. "But you guys will have to overcome the bottleneck in your cultivation." Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and Yu Hongyan bowed together. "We will follow Master's teachings." When the 3 of them entered the profound sky duration chamber, Zhu Yi and Yu Hongyan just had to cultivate on their own. Lin Feng only needed to look after them from the side, but Shi Tianhao's situation was more unique. He had to undergo the Yin Wind tribulation to perfect his golden elixir, which was more difficult for Shi Tianhao's 9th orifice golden elixir. "Tianhao, be careful and focus." Lin Feng gently clapped his hands and a strand of energy flew out, forming into a violet furnace in the air. A Taiji diagram appeared on his forehead and blazing golden flames flew out, forming into the Great Sun's sovereign celestial body. The Great Sun's sovereign celestial body sat in the air with its hands forming seals before its abdomen. The violet furnace flew out and landed on the Great Sun's sovereign's hands. Lin Feng flicked his finger, and a large amount of blue blood appeared, falling into the violet furnace. It was the purest Kuan Peng true blood, and it was extremely condensed, containing great power. It wasn't something that the Kuan Peng bloodline that the Kuan Yu ancestral ancestor possessed could compare to. This was the precious blood that Lin Feng obtained from the ancient Kuan Peng's corpse. It was the blood essence of a great demon that had reached the 3rd stage of the undying demonic soul, the Unity Star Soul. When the blue blood essence fell into the violet furnace, a rumbling sound could be heard, and a silhouette could be seen floating within. It was a fish when it sank, and a peng when it floated. With a wave of his hand, Lin Feng poured another drop of golden blood essence into the violet furnace. It was the coiling dragon blood that he obtained from the desolate ocean assembly. Aside from the coiling dragon blood, Lin Feng also threw the Brontosaurus's corpse and King Phalian's claws into the furnace. In an instant, wind and lightning surged. "Tianhao!" Lin Feng lightly shouted. The little Shi Tianhao answered, "Yes, master." He immediately flew up, drawing an arc in the air and jumping into the purple furnace. The Kuan Peng true blood started to refine Shi Tianhao's body, his energy, and even his soul. The Xiantian 9th orifice's golden elixir started to absorb the Kuan Peng true blood. Lin Feng opened his palm. Above his palm floated the heptagold flowing water stone. Tianhing cinnabar, Sunyang essence stone and other items flew together, all entering the purple furnace. Those treasures fused with the Kuan Peng true blood, turning into soul essences that were absorbed into Shi Tianhao's body along with the Kuan Peng true blood. Lin Feng cut off a section of the heaven-mending vine, and then placed it into the purple furnace. Under the nourishment of the Kuan Peng true blood, this section of the heaven-mending vine rapidly grew. The lower half of the vine completely wrapped around Shi Tianhao's body. The sky-mending vine gradually lost its original appearance and turned into a green ribbon with spiritual energy, being absorbed by Shi Tianhao. The spiritual energy refined the golden hepta-flowing stone's essence and started to repair the Xiantian ninth orifice on the golden elixir. No matter if it was Lin Feng or Shi Tianhao himself, they were both paying close attention to the movements within. Their objective wasn't to completely block the Xiantian ninth orifice on Shi Tianhao's golden elixir. Even if they succeeded, Shi Tianhao's golden elixir would return to a mediocre state. Although it would still be a top-notch violet core, it would be a setback compared to the past. Not only did Lin Feng and his disciple have to overcome the Xiantian tribulation in the golden elixir, but they also had to preserve the uniqueness of Shi Tianhao's golden elixir. This was also the reason why they had to put in so much effort. Otherwise, a single sky-mending vine would be more than enough. Lin Feng has planned for such a long time. It is to help his little disciple's golden core undergo another transformation, solve the problem and go up a level. When facing difficulties, they couldn't take a detour, nor could they retreat. They had to find a way to surpass it. After the spirit energy of the heaven-mending vine started to take effect and the Kunpeng true blood became more and more active, Lin Feng took out the 9 lotus seeds of the earth flame lotus, as well as the spirit herb 9 revolution ice orchid. These 2 items are treasures that he won from a bet with the sect master of the Tianqi sect, Chao Wei, during the Desolate Sea Assembly. At that time, Lin Feng had a clear objective, which was to obtain those items for today. Aside from that, there was also the Yinyang 9 spirit jade that he had obtained from the Kunpeng's treasury. All of those items were sent into the violet cauldron by Lin Feng. Under Lin Feng's guidance, Shi Tianhao carefully absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. After the spiritual energy fused together, it turned into 9 colorful rays that entered the Xiantian ninth orifice of the golden elixir. Chapter 495. 9 streams of light poured into the 9 orifices on Shi Tianhao's golden elixir, and corresponded with each other. The light sealed Shi Tianhao's golden elixir's orifices, but it wasn't completely sealed. It was only a temporary fusion. Under the effect of the Heavenmen Vine and Kunpeng True Blood, a large amount of spiritual energy was poured into the golden elixir. Gradually, Shi Tianhao's golden elixir seemed to be coated with a layer of film. The 9 orifices on the golden elixir emitted a bright radiance. Lin Feng saw that Shi Tianhao's situation in the purple furnace had already gradually stabilized. He let out a sigh of relief in his heart. The first step is complete. Next, the little Shi Tianhao had to absorb and refine the spiritual energy himself in preparation for the final transformation. This would be a long and arduous process that could not be rushed, and could only depend on Shi Tianhao's patience to refine it. The final transformation would come along with the Yin Wind tribulation. As long as Shi Tianhao could overcome the tribulation, not only would his golden elixir reach perfection, but his spiritual energy would also rise to a new level. If he took this step well, it would be much smoother for him to form his nascent soul. Regarding Shi Tianhao forming his nascent soul, Lin Feng was still rather looking forward to it. According to the system's explanation, among the 4 talent potential values, bone innate talent is mainly useful before the nascent soul stage, especially during the Qi disciple stage and foundation building stage. It is definitely the talent value that has the greatest influence on a cultivator. There is no other. Most importantly, the level of aptitude would greatly affect a cultivator's spiritual platform and cauldron grade in the foundation establishment stage, and the grade of the cauldron would directly affect the formation of one's nascent soul in the future. It would be fine if the golden elixir formed a violet or vermilion core, but the possibility of forming a nascent soul would be completely cut off if the nascent soul was formed. After reaching the core formation stage, the influence of aptitude would start to decline. For Yuanying stage cultivators, aptitude would be negligible in their cultivation. There was only one exception. That was a child favored by the heavens with a maximum value of 10 for one's root bone. Even if one reached the primordial spirit realm and got rid of the mortal body, one's root bone with a maximum value would still be affected. Lin Feng was quite looking forward to it. If the system didn't make things up, then when Shi Tianhao formed his nascent soul, he might have special gains that others didn't have. Of course, if he wanted to form his nascent soul, he had to first make sure that the golden elixir was flawless. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Shi Tianhao was refining all kinds of treasures in the Kunpeng True Blood, which was a process that consumed a lot of magic power. Even though his magic power was much greater than ordinary people's, if he continued for a long time, he would be exhausted. However, the cloud forest tree that belonged solely to him could provide him with sufficient spiritual energy and magic power. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shi Tianhao could absorb more and faster of the cloud forest tree's essence energy, and the efficiency would be higher than usual. With the support of sufficient spiritual energy, Shi Tianhao's magic power improved by leaps and bounds, and he was getting closer and closer to the tribulation of Yin Wind and the later stage of the golden elixir. Seeing that Shi Tianhao had stabilized, Lin Feng turned to look at Zhu Yi and Yu Hongyan. Both of them were also cultivating wholeheartedly. After Lin Feng observed the situation of the two, he gradually had an idea in his heart. Zhu Yi's mental state was very stable, and his emotions were stable. He had mastered the Great Tao, and he had even entered the state of thoughtless tranquility. Thoughtless tranquility was the cultivation state that every cultivator dreamed of. The mind was in a state of chaos, and it was most in line with the true essence of the connate Great Tao. In this state, cultivators would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort when cultivating Tao techniques, or comprehending magic power, and it would bring about a cultivation effect of traveling 1,000 miles in a day. Most cultivators would never be able to enter the state of thoughtless tranquility in their entire lives. Even many primordial spirit powerhouses had never experienced such an experience. Zhu Yi was cultivating, and this was also his first time entering the state of thoughtless tranquility. Looks like Xiaoyi has indeed accumulated a lot this time. Lin Feng nodded, and turned to look at Yu Hongyan on the other side. There, Yu Hongyan was also silently meditating, beginning to sprint towards the golden elixir period. Overall, Yu Hongyan's cultivation was also very smooth. However, she did not enter the state of thoughtless tranquility, and was just cultivating normally. Lin Feng took out a small emerald green jade pendant, and then used his magic power to create a small enclosed space, and placed Yu Hongyan inside. Yu Hongyan was startled. "Master." The moment she opened her mouth, her nose had already caught a faint fragrance that was almost imperceptible. Lin Feng smiled. "Cultivate with all your heart, and don't waste Master's mind-calming fragrance. The state of thoughtless tranquility is extremely precious." Very soon Yu Hongyan realized that if she concentrated and resisted, then this fragrance would not affect her at all. However, once she let down her guard, under the effect of the fragrance, her mind would gradually enter a muddled state. The beginning of the world, the beginning of chaos. A mother giving birth to a baby was most suitable for this state of the beginning of chaos. Right now, Yu Hongyan felt as if she had returned to the time when she was a baby. Her mind was empty, and she was half awake. This is thoughtless tranquility. "Master." Yu Hongyan immediately calmed down, and all distracting thoughts were tossed to the back of her mind. She began to cultivate seriously. Lin Feng sensed for a moment, and realized that after Yu Hongyan entered the state of thoughtless tranquility, the efficiency of her cultivation of Tao techniques had indeed increased by another level. Unfortunately, he could clearly feel that she was even more enlightened when it came to the comprehension of Tao techniques. In the past, she might have needed to spend some effort to comprehend the obstacles, but now, it was as easy as walking on flat ground, and she easily resolved them. Moreover, she suddenly understood the hidden profoundness in some of the details that she usually did not notice. Lin Feng nodded his head in satisfaction. The effect is not bad. The fragrance that was stimulated by the mind-calming jade permeated the space, created by Lin Feng's transcendence energy. Very soon, Lin Feng understood the movement within. There is a limit to the amount of fragrance. If the space is too large, the fragrance will become thin, and the effect will probably be reduced. Lin Feng understood. It can only be used by a few people at one time. And the duration? According to the current situation, it should be about 10 days. 10 days was neither long nor short. For martial cultivators, most of the time, seclusion could be measured in years. It was not rare for some primordial soul mighty figures to go into seclusion for thousands of years. 10 days was not a long time compared to the long cultivation time of a cultivator. But if it played a critical role and helped a cultivator break through a bottleneck in their own cultivation process, then 10 days' worth of effort was equivalent to 10 or even 100 years. Lin Feng weighed the mind-calming jade in his hand. It's the same as the heavenly sea golden bead. After using it once, it will enter a dormant period. The heavenly sea golden bead's dormancy period is 7 days, but I wonder how long this thing's dormancy period is? Seeing that his 3 disciples' cultivation was on the right track, and that there would not be any major changes in the short term, Lin Feng took the first step out of the mysterious heaven-time light grotto heaven. He sat on a branch of the mysterious heaven treasure tree, and with a flip of his palm, a mass of purple gas appeared. Within the purple gas was the primordial sky dragon's corpse that Qin Emperor Stonefeather had given him. Even though it was already dead, the corpse still emitted a majestic power. It was 10,000 feet long and looked extremely majestic. There was even a dragon's might and auspicious clouds around it. Lin Feng took out his flame dragon heavenly armor. The armor had been dismantled by him previously, and was in tatters. With a light clap of his palm, Lin Feng's dermic powers transformed into streams of light that infused into the primordial sky dragon's corpse. The sky dragon's corpse was extremely tough. Lin Feng did not wish to destroy it, but to refine it. Therefore, he was very patient as he slowly refined the dragon's body. This dragon belonged to the yellow dragon race of the primordial sky dragon race, when it was alive. The yellow dragon did not have a strong physique like the refined armor black dragon, nor did it have the ability to shift between corporeal and incorporeal like the white jade dragon. However, the yellow dragon race produced more experts than the refined armor black dragon and the white jade dragon. The yellow dragon's innate bloodline divine power lay in its immense demonic power. It was as heavy as the central Wuxia earth, just like the earth. It looked ordinary but was actually extremely powerful. The density of the yellow dragon's demonic power was similar to the mixed essence water divine power that human cultivators cultivated. Few cultivators of the same realm could match it in terms of the total amount of dermic powers. After some consideration, Lin Feng did not refine the yellow dragon's corpse into his clone. Instead, he disintegrated it and extracted the demonic power essence from the dragon flesh to refine the flame dragon heavenly armor. This time, Lin Feng wanted to completely refine the flame dragon heavenly armor into his own Dharma treasure. Majestic dragon roars sounded continuously as waves of dragon might spread. The yellow dragon's body was refined by Lin Feng, the refined armor black dragon's dragon scales, and the flame dragon's eye. Complemented by the Xiantian treasure tree's branches, leaves and dragon tendons, it gradually transformed into an armor. Lin Feng's hands kept changing dermic powers as he injected waves after waves of dermic powers into the armor. Unlike the previous flame dragon heavenly armor, which was pieced together into 2 layers and had a huge protective mirror in front of the chest, it actually hid the red flame demon eyes that had yet to be fully refined. Now this armor was truly one. The armor was still made of scales and was pitch black in color. There were 2 streams of air circling around the armor. One was earthy yellow while the other was fiery red. The 2 streams of air turned into dragon shadows and roared. Under the stimulation of Lin Feng's dermic powers, it was as if the 2 dead primordial heavenly dragons had come back to life. Combine. Lin Feng let out a low roar. His 2 hands joined together and 2 dragon shadows, one yellow and one red, poured into the armor together. The scales on the armor immediately shook violently. As if a divine dragon was shaking the armor, its power was unstoppable. The black armor was plated with a layer of golden brilliance. Within the golden brilliance, one could vaguely see dazzling flames dancing. It's not just the fire dragon demon eyes. It's not appropriate to call it the flame dragon heavenly armor anymore. Lin Feng smiled. From today onwards, it shall be called the dragon god heavenly armor. Upon hearing this, the dragon god heavenly armor shook a little and released a breath of life. A brand new, independent life consciousness was born from it. That was the Dharma treasure spirit of the dragon god heavenly armor. However, it was still in a muddled state and needed time to grow. Refining a magic treasure was an incomparably long process. What it burned was time. Many magic treasures required hundreds or even thousands of years to refine and still might not be successful. Lin Feng had only completed the first step in refining the dragon god heavenly armor. There was still a long way to go. However, just now Lin Feng could feel the power of the dragon god heavenly armor. It was far stronger than the flame dragon heavenly armor in the past. This satisfied Lin Feng. Strictly speaking, the flame dragon heavenly armor was just a fake Dharma treasure. However, its power could be passed off as the real one. Now the dragon god heavenly armor was even stronger. When it was completed, it would be even stronger. Thinking about the few good items that he still had, Lin Feng couldn't help but laugh. Ha! Now I can be called the treasure boy. Lin Feng once had the idea to give each of his personal disciples a Dharma treasure after they reached the Yuanying realm. From the looks of it, he was close to achieving his goal. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.